And Mr. Rano, if you want to call the roll, we can get started.
Councilmember Rahman.
Here.
Councilmember Gerardo.
Here.
Councilmember Blumenfield, absent. Councilmember Hutt, absent. Councilmember McOsker. Here. 3 members of quorum, Madam Chair.
Great. Wonderful. So today we have 12 items to consider on the agenda. Hopefully most of them will be fairly straightforward. We have one meaty one. Item 1 is reappointment of Eric Minoru to the Prop HHH Oversight Committee. Item 2 is a CAO report about something that's pretty exciting, an agreement between the Housing Department and the Inner City Law Center to provide legal representation services for people who are facing tenant harassment, which is something that the city has been waiting for a long time. And I think this could actually make that law a little bit more effective, which is great. Item 3 is the CAO report about an amendment to a contract between the Housing Department and a company that's helping us do accessibility consulting services so that we can monitor a settlement agreement on accessibility in our housing. Item 4 is the 30th Homelessness Emergency Account Report from the CAO, and if I'm not mistaken, there are no funding recommendations in this. Item 5 is the 10th Homelessness Emergency Declaration Report from the CAO, and this will likely be our last. Item 6 is the second homelessness funding report, also from the CAO. Item 7 is the CAO and LAHD report about issuing a $1.5 million bond for the Southside Senior Housing Supportive Housing Project, which is in Council District 8. Okay. Item 8 is an LAHD report about the loan agreement term for the El Dorado Family Apartments in Council District 7. Item 9 is an LAHD report about the thing that most people are probably here for, which is establishing the annual allowable rent increase for the rent stabilization ordinance and making a change to that formula after 40 years. Item 10 is the MFC report about a lease agreement for a tiny home village, which is in Council District 13. Item 11 is a motion that's requesting an overview and analysis of programs currently supported by HAP funding, and this will probably work in parallel to another funding motion that we have about homelessness funding and how we monitor it in this committee, hopefully in a more legible way as we move forward rather than motion by motion, report by report. And finally, we have item 12, which is a motion to approve the sale and change of ownership for an affordable housing project in Council District 14. So with that, I want to move to take public comment. I want to make sure our Spanish interpreter is here. I think he's there behind the chair. And Michael Custodio from the City Attorney's Office is going to provide guidance to the public, and we'll start calling some names.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the members of the public, when it is your turn to speak, please state the name you signed up under, which of the agenda items you would like to speak on, and whether you would like to provide general public comment. You have 1 minute per item, up to 2 minutes total for items on the agenda, and 1 minute for general public comment if you wish, for a maximum speaking time of up to 3 minutes per person. Please speak to the agenda items before beginning general public comment. We will inform you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you are not speaking on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you are on topic, you will get one brief warning from me or Madam Chair. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic, or if you stray off topic, you will forfeit the rest of your time, and we will move on to the next speaker.
Okay, great. So I want to just say it's 2:08, and let me call some names. I'll call Bill Handy, Erica Martinez, Irene Ortiz, Leor Masiborski, Maria Saldiva, Rachel Garcia, Titus Fozzo, Victor Alvarenga, Caroline Smith. And if anyone who's speaking, whose name has been called, if you could make your way to that side of the chambers, and the sergeants will help guide you up to the podium. Welcome, your name and the item you're speaking on.
Hi, I'm William Handy, or Bill Handy, as I signed in, and I'm speaking on agenda item 9 and general comment.
Okay, you have 1 minute for the item and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Thank you for being here as an audience. I'm a housing provider for 40,000 Angelinos, and I have been in this business 35 years, and I have yet to see a program that has lowered rents for our tenants. We know that if our annual increase is lowered from what it is currently, that we will enter into that financial zone where we are not making a reasonable return on our investment. Remember that this council is involved with setting the new trash hauling system that's been around for about 10 years now. Those costs have quadrupled for us. Department of Water and Power charges have gone up. And now I'll switch to general comments. Thank you. I'm sure everybody in this room is aware that the liability and fire insurance status for all of us Angelenos is tenuous. Our insurance has doubled and tripled for less coverage. Our operating costs have increased grossly, and I think it's a disservice to the housing providers to lower the amount of rent that we might charge a tenant on a yearly basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please make your way up to the podium. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
And Madam Chair, for the record, Councilmember.
Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry. Oh, hold on for just 1 second. Sorry.
And just for the record, Councilmembers Blumenfield and Hutt have joined us.
Welcome, welcome, council members. And I just, sorry, if you could give me 1 moment. There are 2 amendments for items 8 and 6, I believe. If you want to read those into the record now before public comment.
I only have the amendment for item 6. I do not currently have the one for item 8.
Okay, if you
I
want to
believe.
read the item 6 amendment, I think that'll be helpful. You just want to make sure that people have it before comment. And then LAHD, oh, you have it. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay.
Just hold on for 1 minute. Yeah. Go ahead.
Pranita Amate from the CLA's office. This is amendment to item 6. For recommendation 1, strike recommendation 1C and add an instruction to the CAO in coordination with the Downtown Women's Center to report on how to program unspent funds that can be used to address current needs of the Downtown Women's Center's rapid rehousing program.
Is that it?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. That's for item 6, and the amendment for item 8, I believe we have Craig here from LAHD to read that into the record. Welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. Craig Arsenault from LHD. We'd like to amend item 8, recommendation A, to read, authorize the general manager of LHD or designee to negotiate and execute all documents required to extend the loan term for the El Dorado Family Apartments, Home Loan BA0517, to mature on November 13th, 2061, and align with the affordability restrictions expiration date. General manager of LHD or designee to negotiate and execute all documents, including but not limited to subordinating all city loans, BA0517 and CRA 872559-002, required for El Dorado Family Apartments per the terms of the loan agreement or as set forth herein.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, let's move back to public comment. Go ahead, speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Madam
Hello.
Chair.
Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Speaker. Would you like to move those amendments forward, Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, I'd like to move those amendments.
And may I have a second, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon for the 3rd time. My name is
Yes.
Erica Martinez. I am a renter from District 9.
And what items are you
Oh,
speaking on?
yes, I'm here to comment on item 9 in general comment.
Okay, you have 1 minute, 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. I'm here just to remind you that most of the people that the owners are here are renting the houses, and we are a minimum wage people from LA. He's talking about 40,000, and the percentage that is different for us is a big deal. We are paycheck to paycheck. We are a paycheck away from being on the street just down the street from here that we all see every day in LA. We have to be conscious of the percentage and what we are doing to the people of LA. 3% should be the cap for this proposal. General comment, it's again, you know, we here, most of us are discussing about $100 that will make a difference in our households for groceries, for paying the rent, for coming out with paying our rent on a timely matter, where they're talking about buying tickets to Disneyland, tickets or other places, paying for paying for private schools, and we are talking about coming out with $100 to pay for the rent that we pay for their houses, we pay for their mortgages, we pay for them to stay in business. And yet, a big difference for us is a big deal. For them, it's not really a big deal. 3 to 8% is a big deal for us, not a big deal for them. You guys have to remember, again, we are on a paycheck to paycheck. We are minimum wage people that are and want to stay home. We don't want to be homeless and being on the street and having to beg for a life, a dignity of life in this city of LA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry. People who are in the chambers, I'm going to request that we not have cheering or clapping. We need to get through as many speakers as possible, and we want to make sure that people are quiet and respectful. I also really don't want to hear booing of views. There's going to be differences of opinion here, and we all have to be respectful to one another, and that's an expectation that we're going to maintain. Sorry, speaker, go ahead. Your name and the items you're
Good
speaking on.
afternoon. My name is Tari Foso. I'm with Sage, and I'm here. I'm renter from District 10.
What
I'm here to
items are you
comment.
speaking on?
General comment and 9.
Okay, you have 1 minute, 1 minute. Go ahead.
I'm here today to ask you to support the Keep LA House Coalition proposal to strengthen LASO, the Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance. Although the rent keeps increasing, my base salary has not increased even a bit. In this situation, I will not be able to stay in my home with the rent increasing at the current rate. The 10% additional occupant increase makes me unable to take in and care for my whole family. We have already been struggling to regroup since COVID pandemic. I urge the City Council to adopt Keep LA House demand for the RSO formula rent increase based on 60% cap all items, a cap of 3% with no floor, no bumps for utility and additional occupant, no rent banking. By strengthening LASO to reflect Keep LA House proposal, the city can create a formula that balances the need of tenant and landlord, respond to our uncertain financial time, and stabilize vulnerable community around the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Thank you. Next speaker. ¿Su nombre?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Irene. Quiero comentar sobre el punto número 9.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Irene, or Irene, and I would like to give a public comment over number 9.
Okay, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Un minuto, adelante.
Soy parte del comunitario Poder Comunitario. Soy inquilina del Distrito 14. Les pido que fortalezcan LARSO.
So I am a member of Community Power Collective, and I am a tenant in District 14, and I'm asking for you to please strengthen LARSO.
Con un límite máximo del 3% en los aumentos de renta que eliminen los recargos sobre servicios públicos y ocupantes adicionales.
And we're asking for you to strengthen that formula by having a cap at 3% on annual rent increases and not adding additional percentages for utilities.
He sido afectada directamente por los aumentos de renta. Mi renta ha subido más de lo permitido y ahora con las redes de ICE he dejado de trabajar.
And I have been directly affected by these rent increases because my rent has increased more than the allowable amount, and I have had to stop working because of the ICE raids.
Porque tengo miedo de salir de mi casa y es muy difícil escoger entre pagar la renta o comprar comida.
And I have been afraid to leave my house, and which is why I stopped working because of the ICE raids. And it's very difficult to have to choose between paying my rent or buying food.
Por favor, piensen en las familias trabajadoras como la mía. Un límite justo del 3% nos ayudaría a mantener nuestros hogares.
Please think of hardworking families like mine, and please set a fair limit, a fair cap at 3%, so that we're able to keep ourselves in our own homes and support our families.
Y vivir con dignidad. Límite de renta 3%. Gracias.
And to be able to live a life with dignity. So please cap the rent at 3%.
Thank you. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Leor Masaborski. I'm speaking on general public comment, item 9.
Okay, you have 1 minute, 1 minute. If you could just move the microphone higher up so that we could hear you, that would be great. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm here to oppose item number 9, which is the rent recalculation. Ever since the COVID rent freezes, we've been suffering even long before then. Insurance costs have gone up by about 150%. Our trash bills, as a result of Recycle LA, are up 360%. Manpower, all manufactured products, as a result of the tariffs, are also up some in the double or triple digits. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. This committee had the audacity to enact a 4-year COVID rent freeze while the rest of the country was going back to business, and then 4% after that. Now we're talking about going back down into 2%. It's just unbelievable. It's just fundamentally bad policy. I don't know what else this committee could do to lower housing investment in the city of Los Angeles. In 2016, LA was the largest recipient of global real estate capital in the world, beating New York and London, Singapore. Now we don't even make the list on the top 10. I don't know how else this can come to resonate with all of you. Nobody wants to be here. Nobody wants to invest here because of laws like this. Moving on to general public comment. Again, this is just, people do not want to invest here because of this, the security deposit reductions, you can't do criminal background checks, but I'm so proud that we've been able to mobilize this many landlords, this many management companies, that maybe you can all stand up and show the force of what we're trying to achieve here. I know for certain of you, I'm sure you celebrated last night when you had a great election in New York, but I'm telling you that was the peak of that power, and now we're mobilizing against you. We are not your punching bag. We are not here to be the subsidy. We're not here to subsidize the limitations of LA's housing policy. If LA wants to make rent cheaper, then it should pay for it by itself. Thank you.
Great. Next speaker. Your next speaker, and I'll call a couple more names. Adela Peñalva, Chelsea Rosales, Craig Davis, Gloria Genyard, Jesse Gambo, Leslie Meza. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Definitely not Carolina
You can
Smith.
start this individual's time.
Pero ya sabes, pinche putos y putas de esta ciudad. Por 40 pinche años, ustedes fregados nunca ayuda a la gente minoridades aquí, por babosos.
You're right. You're all bitches, and you've never helped people for the last 40 fucking years, and especially not minorities.
Y por esto, cabrones jodidos, como tú, pinche Bloomfield, nunca ayuda a los pinches mexicanos jodidos, porque usted es casado con un pinche morena y no ayuda a nosotros, pinche cabrón.
That's why you all are assholes, especially fucking Blumenfield, and you've never helped any fucking Mexicans, especially because you married a black person.
Speaker, can we get you to speak on an item that's on the agenda? If not, we'll move you to general public comment and give you 1 minute.
Hey, asshole. I'm on number 5 now.
No, you're not.
Number 5, David O'Carter doesn't want to hear about your reports. David Carter wants results. David Carter, the federal judge, wants Ramen Noodle to report with reports before she is indicted on criminal charges of corruption. That's the reason why there's not enough housing. That's the reason why you fools believe in them. You should believe in what you believe in your heart, that there's something fucking wrong with housing. There's something fucking wrong with Los Angeles. That the reason for declaration of this fucking bullshit 30th Statutes report is nonsense, and that moron attorney idiot is a jackass. Por ejemplo, el segundo homeless fund on item 6, fuck item 6. Fuck item 7, fuck item 9, fuck item 10, and fuck all your homeless bullshit. Now into my general public comment. The story behind government at local level is they don't want you to afford shit. They want you to work till you die. They want you to be their slaves and have fear and create problems so that they can say, that's the reason why minorities live in Los Angeles, because we got them by the balls. Now, if you are a true man and woman, don't be afraid to talk to these assholes and morons, because they fucked up your lives. I don't have to worry. I get 2 checks a month. I have a nice house on the hill. I got 3 cars, a dog, woof, woof. And I don't suck dick, Bob, like you. So whenever, Bob, you think about your racist Jews and your money tree and your shackle tree, just remember, Bob, God hates you. You're going to hell. And priests,
Thank you so much,
boys,
Speaker.
fuck you.
Sincerest apologies to everyone who had to hear that. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Speaker.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Víctor Alvarenga.
Good afternoon, my name is Victor
La
Alvarenga.
razón por estar aquí es porque el incremento de renta está muy alta
Okay, you can
y
start this
creemos
individual's
que
time.
para todas las personas, los miles de personas que hay aquí en California, el costo de renta es alta y nos gustaría que le bajaran al 3%.
Señor,
un
momento, necesito que traducir. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about the rent increases and that it has been too much and that the thousands of people that live in California are struggling with these rent increases. Adelante.
Porque muchísima gente no puede pagar renta ahorita por los problemas que están pasando en las calles, migración. Mucha gente no puede salir a trabajar por ese motivo.
And a lot of people aren't able to pay their rents because of everything that is happening out in the streets. I mean, we have immigration and a lot of people are afraid to be able to go out and work.
Tenemos personas, inquilinos que tienen que buscar gente para que compartan con ellos porque el costo es demasiado alto.
And we have people who are tenants who are out trying to find roommates because the cost for them to live, it has become way too much.
Y yo creo que el 3% para nosotros los inquilinos sería justo porque muchos tenemos familia.
And I think a 3% cap and annual rent increases for us tenants would be fair because we have families.
Porque como dijo una compañera...
Okay, gracias. Gracias. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hello, my name is Rachel Garcia. Thank you for having me here today.
Sorry, can you just move the microphone, yes, closer to you, there you go, and say your name one more time and the items you're speaking on?
Okay, hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me here. My name is Rachel Garcia, and I'm speaking on item 9 and a general statement.
Okay, so you have 1 minute and 1 minute, go ahead.
Thank you. So today I'd like to address how I've been personally affected on item 9. I was evicted last year, and I've experienced so many things just trying to finish my education. And I see that so many other people have similar stories here today. And I'm just asking all of you to please listen and have a heart. I know some of you are out of touch, maybe don't really know what's going on in the street. Crimes are up. Police officers have a hard time trying to keep everything intact. I do community service with LAPD. I'm a volunteer. I've experienced homelessness. I've lost my job, and I'm struggling as an American citizen of this country and an Angelino of California. And I'm asking all of you to please keep the rent low. I don't know if it's 3%, but I'm concerned how much rent we pay in California alone. And I'd like to say a personal story is that how can we pay our bills? How can we pay anything when everything goes to rent? We're basically living to pay rent. American citizens, not just immigrants, American citizens are struggling in California to pay rent. And I'm asking all of you to be more aware of how do you expect us to live a quality life, paying our bills, and living not in survival mode, but just a quality life to be good citizens of California and the United States of America. There's a lot of things happening in our country, and we need to pay attention, and we need to help people. And I'm asking you, please, keep the rent low. If it's 3% cap, please keep it livable for Californians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Yes, hello. My name is Craig Davis, and I'm speaking on item 9.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a CPA who has owned and operated RSO properties in the city of Los Angeles for nearly 40 years and currently own a 24-unit building that my wife and I reside in. We have an incredible group of tenants, but I have to strongly urge you not to change the RSO formula. Being a housing provider is a business. And if we're unable to support our expenses, it just makes it not a very viable business. I have seen in the past 2 years, and again, I've been in it for 40 years, incredible increases in costs such as insurance, property taxes, utilities, trash hauling, and maintenance in our own building. I have seen our insurance go up quadruple in just 4 years. It's now our single largest expense. I don't want to pass increases to people either, but I have to cover those costs. It's just a reality. And on a more general basis, if we depress building expenses and depress the ability for landlords and property owners to manage their business, who's going to want to buy any of these buildings? Who's going to want to come into LA? It's just going to make the housing crisis even more dramatic. So I really encourage you to take a closer look and not change the RSO. Instead, I think we need to focus on a balanced solution that protects and helps both renters and housing providers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. And let me just call a few more names. Jessica, sorry, just give me one moment just to call a couple more names. Jessica Juarez, Zohar Yakov, Valerie Valentine, Stuart Waldman, Sergio Vargas, Roberto Huerta. Go ahead, speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Greetings. Item number 9.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
I'm Gloria Gignord. I'm a retired executive member of Local 99. We represent over 30,000 classified employees and thousands of educated workers and child care providers across LA. Our families we serve cannot afford to live in our own communities. Neither can we. In 2022, coming with the teachers, we led the largest public educational strike in U.S. history, along with our labor's allies in the communities. Our members has fought very hard with their dignity, and we won a 30% raise. Still, with the cost of skyrocketing, and we can barely keep the peace. Over 1.5 members have either experienced homelessness or paycheck away, or should they be able to be evicted on the streets. The increase of rent has priced us out of our cities and forced our community to have struggle each and every day. This is not acceptable. Landlords do not take care of our kids or either our community. We need 3% of rent control cap and expect them to do right by us and you as our constituent. I hope you will support this. We love LA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Shh. Your name and the items you're speaking on. Go ahead, speaker. ¿Su nombre?
Sí, artículo 9, comentario público.
¿Y su
Buenas
nombre,
tar-
por favor?
María Rivas.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
My name is Maria Rivas, and I'm talking about Article number 9. Adelante.
Okay. Estamos aquí apoyando a que no haya aumento más del 3% el incremento de renta. Y voy a hablar de dos partes. Yo he sido inquilina y al haber sido inquilina tuve que compartir la vivienda con otra familia para poder pagar. Perdón, ¿hay traducción?
Sí, señora, un segundo.
Gracias.
I am here to ask for you to cap the rent at 3%, and I'm also here to talk about two sides of this. See, as a renter, I had to share the living space with another family in order to be able to afford it. Adelante.
Cuando fue inquilina fue muy difícil porque cuando llegaba Navidad, en lugar de estar esperando esa hermosa Navidad, blanca Navidad, estábamos esperando que ya viene enero y iba a haber un incremento en la renta. Entonces, era muy difícil. Así viví durante 12 años. Actualmente ya tengo mi propiedad.
¿Me permite?
Sí.
And it was very difficult. I remember, when it was Christmas time, and instead of waiting for Christmas, for beautiful white Christmas, instead we're sitting there thinking, wow, it's almost the 1st of January. Here comes another rent increase.
Okay.
And that's how I lived for 12 years. Adelante.
Rento un espacio en mi propiedad. Eso no me hace, lo estoy rentando no para hacerme más rica, simplemente para ayudar a mi comunidad y para que vivan tranquilos. Ellos me apoyan y yo los apoyo. Y así...
Adelante.
¿Sigo?
Sí, adelante.
Perdón. Se acabó.
Gracias.
Okay. Gracias.
Next speaker, your name. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I finally now am a property owner, and I rent a property. I rent a unit out from my property, and I don't do it to make myself richer. I do it to help my community. They support me, and I support them.
Thank you. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Artículo 9, comentario público.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Su nombre, por favor.
Hola, mi nombre es Irma Sosa. Soy miembro de ACE del Distrito 15 y vivo en el área de Watts.
Hi, my name is Irma Sosa. I'm a member of ACE, and I lived in District 5 in the Watts area. Adelante.
Y mi comentario es para Mac Hosker,
And my commentary is for Matt
que nos dio la
McCosker.
oportunidad y darle las gracias que de las personas que están aquí he tenido la oportunidad de compartir con él. Me encantó porque nos escuchó, pero hoy vengo para ver qué resultados vamos a tener en esta plática que tuvimos con él. Gracias por atendernos.
I am here specifically to say to Mr. McCosker, from my behalf and the people behind me, thank you for coming and listening to us. And I appreciate that very much. But I am here to see what the results are going to be from the talk that we had. Thank you so much.
Y yo vengo por lo mismo de todos mis compañeros a apoyar el 3% no más para las rentas. Porque ver una persona fuera de tu casa que está con niños y madre en todo fuera y tienen muebles, comida echada a perder, ¿Cómo es posible que ustedes que tienen el poder de ayudarnos como comunidad, recibiendo cheques en alto y nosotros en bajo, no pueda tocar sus corazones de ver esas personas fuera de una casa?
¿Me permite, señora? And I am here, just like the rest of my friends behind me, to ask you to cap the rent at 3% because I have to say, looking outside of your window and seeing a family there with children, a mother, sitting out on the street, their furniture strewn around, rotting food. I'm asking you, how can you, who have the power, who are paid a check, look at this and not want to solve it? I'm asking you to have a heart.
Disculpen, pero ver esto es difícil. Cuando lo platican es una cosa, pero cuando lo ves es otra cosa. Entonces, por eso yo vengo a apoyar que esas personas como nosotros que tenemos una casita, rentamos y tenemos que tener 2 trabajos y a veces ustedes lo han visto, vender comida en nuestra casa para poder apoyar en nuestros gastos. Es difícil, 3 trabajos, entonces en casa no hay nadie y para ir a recibir un alimento lo dan en la mañana y tenemos que trabajar. Entonces trabajamos para la renta y la comida no podemos ir a recogerla porque es en la mañana, en la noche nos vamos a veces sin comer.
No, I'm sorry, but it's hard. And it may be hard to talk about in here, but it's very difficult to see. And that's why we're asking you to cap the rent at 3%, to think about people like us, people that we rent a small home and we have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to pay rent. And sometimes we don't even have enough for food. We have to make money just so that we can pay the rent. It's very difficult.
Disculpen y gracias por escucharme y yo apoyo el 3%. Espero y escuchen a nuestro pueblo que son los que vivimos el momento. Gracias.
And I'm sorry, but thank you. And I hope you listen to us and you listen to the people because we are the ones who are living this in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Shh. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Good afternoon. My name is Valerie Valentine. I would like to speak on general public comment and item number 9.
Okay, you have 1 minute for the item, 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
I'm speaking to all of you and to everyone in this chamber. I am the new face of what a small mom and pop landlord is today. I am struggling. I struggle like everyone else in here. I have a job, but I have to pay high costs on everything as a small mom and pop landlord. The Los Angeles County Housing Resource Center quotes that 70% of all rentals in Los Angeles are less than 5 units. That's me. I'm not a greedy landlord. I'm just trying to make a living, just like the rest of you all. Of the 70%, more than 85% of the small mom and pop landlords, like me, have buildings that are 15 years or older. That means that we have more costly repairs. It is not just insurance and property taxes. I can tell you from a personal experience, I have debt service that I have to pay for buildings. Debt service means that these are obligations are far and beyond the cost of actually operating a building. It's very expensive. Electrical upgrades that are mandated by the city and also just mandated by general physical obsolescence of a building. It costs money. We're not greedy. We're just trying to make a living. I urge you not to lower the actual rent stabilization ordinance from 3% to 2%. It needs to go higher. We cannot sustain this. You're killing us. We have electrical upgrades, plumbing upgrades, structural upgrades, system upgrades. Who's paying for all of this? We're not greedy. We're just asking you. I'm the new face of a mom and pop landlord, and I'm struggling. I have to go down to the bottom of my piggy bank, pennies, nickels, just to afford the debt on a building. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's not expensive. It's not inexpensive. So I'm asking you, please, do not lower the rent increase from 3% to 2%.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Nadav Zohar, item 9 and public comment.
Okay, you have 1 minute for the item, 1 minute for general public comment.
Thank you. I want to start by having all the landlords and housing providers stand up with your signs. I'm asking for you to do this because I want each and every one of you to see how many housing providers are here. And I've been counting the number of speakers. Although 75% or more of the room is housing providers, 85% of the speakers represent the other side. Look at who's speaking after me. 1, 2, 3, 4 of the other side. That's an imbalance with respect to who's in this room, and I hope it's not intentional. Ms. Raman, my first comment is directed to you. I've seen your Instagram post, your most recent one about the rent control. If somebody fell here from the moon, they would think that rent control landlords can increase rent by 8% or 20%. What you intentionally failed to do is to mention that the last time 8% increase was allowed was probably over 30 years ago. You also mentioned to fail the various years of price gouging laws where landlords were not allowed to adjust rent to market. You also, and yes, you can speak to whoever you're speaking with, and that's how you're disrespecting your constituents because I'm not your supporter, but that's highly disrespectful. I'm here for 3 hours already, and you're gonna give me the proper attention when I'm speaking to you. You also failed to mention the 4 or 5 years of a rent increase freeze. On your Instagram post, you are spreading fake news, inaccuracy, and exaggeration, and that's how you're gathering support. I'm an attorney and I'm a housing provider. My clients are small landlords, just like the lady that was here prior to me. People are struggling. Landlords should not be forced into the eviction business. They are housing providers. The costs are up, and your overregulation is just
Thank you very
simply
much.
crushing the economy.
Thank you, I appreciate your perspective. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Roberto Huerta. Vengo por parte de la organización Community Coalition, pero también de la organización Poder Comunitario.
Good afternoon. My name is Roberto Huerta, and I'm here with Community Coalition and also with the organization Poder Comunitario. Adelante.
Sí. ¿Ya tienes claro? El número 9 y el comentario público. Sí. Sí. Sí.
Go ahead, speaker.
Adelante, comentarista.
Ok. Bueno, así como somos miembros de distintas organizaciones, yo como miembro de Community Coalition, pues yo también arriendo. Y ya pues, digamos, ya me mandó a decir el dueño, dice, oye, mira, en enero tenemos ya aumento de renta. Y entonces le digo, oye.
So I am here. As you can see, we're various organizations that are here. I am a part of Community Coalition, and I am also a renter. And well, the owner told me that come January, we're going to have an increase again. Adelante, señor.
Claro. Y ya eso ya comenzamos, como dicen, a crujir los dientes, porque la situación que estamos atravesando es una situación compleja que en la mayoría de los miembros de la organización también los expresan, que están pasando este problema económico y social.
And this, you know, it's making us shiver. It's scary because we're, as everyone else has expressed, we're entering these really difficult times, both socially and economically. Adelante, señor.
Y no voy a profundizar sobre las cosas que ya saben ustedes y aquí ya la han expresado los otros miembros de la organización. Lo que sí quiero persuadir y quiero hacer conciencia en los miembros del Comité de Vivienda, que tienen que ser consecuentes con las necesidades que tiene la población.
Now, I don't want to go deeper into this on things that you already know because people have already spoke about them. But I just want to persuade you and ask you to be conscious about the necessities of the people.
Sí, nosotros consideramos que el 3% no es muy alto, no es tan bajo, pero consideramos que es aceptable ese 3% que se pueda considerar en este incremento. Por lo tanto, pedimos de sus buenos oficios, principalmente los miembros del Comité de Vivienda, que sea consecuente con la necesidad de la gente y también con la situación que está viviendo la gente, dada la situación de este país que estamos atravesando. Falta de trabajo, falta de seguridad.
Adelante, señor. We believe that the 3% isn't too high and isn't too low, and we're asking you to be conscious of the needs of people. And so we are asking you respectfully to be conscious of what's happening to us in this country. The lack of safety, the lack of employment. Adelante, señor.
Entonces, esperamos consecuencias con este problema que tenemos con la renta y dejamos a conciencia de ustedes también esta situación. Muchas gracias.
And then, so we ask that you have a consciousness housing committee to solve this rent problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker,
Gracias. Próximo comentario.
your name and the items you're speaking on.
Tomasa Martínez.
Tomasa Martínez, ¿en qué punto va a dar su comentario?
I'm sorry, hold on. Did we call your name, speaker?
De hecho, ya le llamamos su nombre, señora.
Sí.
No, I don't think so.
No lo creo.
Tomasa Martinez is not on our list yet. I
Tomasa
just want to make sure
Martínez no
that the
aparece.
speakers we called are getting a chance to speak.
Nomás quiero asegurar que las personas que vayan a hablar tengan su oportunidad de hablar.
Quiero hablar en el punto 9 y los comentarios públicos general.
I would like to speak about item 9 and public comment.
I did call a set of names. I just want to make sure the people that we're calling are getting a chance to speak.
Entonces no puedo hablar.
She's not, right? No. I'm sorry. Thank you. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Are there other speakers in line? Okay, let me call a few more names then. Christina Briones, Dylan Robertson, Fred Sutton, Jess Bone, Jesse Gambo, Maria Osorio, Nadav Zohar. Okay. I'm sorry, I may have called that name already. Some people are signed up multiple times. Tony Martinez. Okay, go ahead. Your name and the items you're speaking on?
Sí, mi nombre es Cristina Campos.
Hi, yes,
Vengo
my
a
name is Cristina Campos. Adelante.
Vengo a hablar sobre el artículo número 9 y comentario general.
I'm here to give a comment on item 9 and general public comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Adelante.
You have 1 minute and 1 minute.
Un minuto para cada uno.
Sí, buenas tardes, gracias. Yo vivo en el distrito 9 y vengo a pedirles de que apoyen y de que voten sí para lo del ARSO, porque el tope sea solamente el 3%.
Good afternoon. Un momento. Good afternoon, thank you. I am from District 9, and I'm here to ask you to please vote yes on LARSO with a 3% cap.
Sí, vivo en el distrito 9, es un distrito de que la mayoría somos inquilinos, la mayoría estamos con un sueldo mínimo que pensamos en pagar la renta o comprar comida.
Yes, as I said, I live in District 9, and in District 9, it is majority tenants, and the majority of those tenants also have a low salary where they have to choose whether they're going to pay their rent or they're going to buy food.
Sí, nosotros estamos sufriendo con la familia, pasando un desalojo porque pues la dueña de la propiedad, pues a ella le interesa su dinero, pero pues es muy difícil cambiarse de residencia donde las rentas ahorita están carísimas.
And my family and I, we have suffered an eviction where our landlord, she wanted her money. And it is very difficult to move homes in a place where rent is so expensive.
Sí, pues los dueños de propiedad, ellos dicen que hablan de seguro, que hablan de otros gastos, pero nosotros Las personas que trabajamos día a día estamos preocupados por
And,
nuestra comida.
And, you know, these landlords are here commenting about insurance and other expenses, but we're the ones who are going to work every day and we're concerned about food.
También no sabemos, o sea, qué solución puede haber, porque realmente con esos aumentos de renta, yo no quiero parar en la calle. Vivo en la ciudad de Los Ángeles y todos los días y al cruzar mi calle, debajo del puente, viven demasiadas personas sin hogar.
And, you know, we want to find a solution because either with the rent going up, I'm afraid that I'm going to end up in the street, and I live in Los Angeles. And every time I walk or I cross the street, I see people who are living under bridges, who are homeless.
Entonces, por eso les pido a los concejales, a los comités de vivienda, que por favor voten, que pasen, que solo sea el 3%. Realmente no me quiero ver en la calle yo también con mi familia. Gracias.
And so I'm asking City Council, I'm asking the Housing and Homelessness Committee to please vote yes on this 3% cap. I don't want to see myself and my family on the streets.
Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Su nombre, por favor.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es...
Oh, you need to turn.
¿Acá? Ok. Buenas tardes, miembros del concilio. Mi nombre es Cristina Briones. Soy inquilina y vendedora ambulante.
And what item are you speaking on?
Good afternoon,
Del
council
número
members.
9.
My name is Cristina Briones. I am a tenant and I am also a street vendor. ¿En qué punto va a dar su comentario, señora?
En el 9.
Solo en 9. Item 9, please.
Okay, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Un minuto, adelante.
Estoy aquí para que ustedes apoyen el control de renta y que haya un tope del 3% en la renta. Soy una vendedora ambulante que estamos sufriendo los impactos de las redadas como vendedora ambulante.
Yes, I'm here because I'm asking you to support the rent stabilization with the 3% cap. And I work as a street vendor and I have personally suffered the effects of ICE raids.
No tenemos de otra más que salir a buscar cómo poder encontrar para comer y pagar la renta. Tenemos miedo si hay un aumento en la renta. Muchos vendedores estaremos expuestos a ser uno más sin hogar. Concejales.
So for us, there is no other way for us to be able to find food and to pay the rent. And with the rent prices continuing to increase, I'm afraid that as a vendor, I'm going to be just another person who's unhoused.
Concejales, voten a favor de los inquilinos, a favor de vendedor ambulante, por favor, para tener un techo seguro.
So, council members, I ask you to please vote in favor of the tenants, in favor of the street vendors, and in favor of the people who are able to survive and pay for their homes.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. And I'd like to call, there are 2 speakers signed up for item 12. Judge Curtis Mayo.
Are you ready?
And Kash Patel,
Okay,
which
I'm
I'm
ready.
sure is a fake name, but if the 2 people speaking on item 12, if you want to come up, your name and the items you're speaking on. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, my name is Van Victor, and I'm speaking on the document on the document number 9.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to thank my Mexican brothers and sisters. They always think about somebody. They just don't bring something to the party for one person. They bring it for all. Thank you all very much. Okay. What I want to talk about is not capping the rent at 3%. And I think that it's important that you guys have been in this position before, where you've seen people homeless, or you might have almost just been homeless. What we're trying to do is get you to cap the rent at 3%. That's one of the things we want to talk about. And you guys know this is an election coming up next year, and I think most of you guys are going to be running for the election. It is Zero Mandani's time right now. And I'm so glad that he won New York. He set a precedent out there for all of us to follow. I do believe that you guys have the power to do this, to reduce the rent and keep it capped out at 3%. And if you guys could do that, and also what we're trying to do is remove bumps
thank you.
and utilities and additional.
Thank you very much. And actually, Mr. Victor, I didn't call your name, and I'm just going to request that everyone who's in line, it has to be people whose names I called. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. It's not fair to the other speakers. We're calling names randomly. Go ahead. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hello, my name is Dylan Robertson, and I'm speaking on item 9 and general comment.
Okay, you have 1 minute and 1 minute. Go ahead.
I'm a mom and pop housing provider, third generation. Been doing this in the family since 1960s, and I just want to share one piece of data. We have an elevator, and you need a landline for that elevator. It used to be $20 from AT&T. It's now $800 a month, and I have 3 dedicated lines. I share that because many of our housing providers will tell you that eats up your 2 to 3% raise just in that cost. And I haven't even gotten into insurance, which is doubled. And then the DWP and the utilities. And I want to talk about that for a moment, because when the utilities have come before this very commission, they have seeking long-term stability and improvements and a right to a profit. And you've granted that to them. But when we ask for the exact same thing and have the same data, we're denied it. I'm going to speak on the general comment now. It's not sustainable, this system. And I feel bad for the people who are renters, because the truth is, in order for us to afford the improvements we make, and for people to be sustainable, it means that the next generation is going to have to pay more. That $1,000 a month person, when they vacate, I will have to charge $6,000. That doesn't work, and I want to consider an alternative. Right now, 75% of the LA economy isn't taxed in services. If you were to enact a 1% service tax, you would have a $6 billion fund to fund affordability. That is a solution, and the first one offered today. If rent control would have worked, it's been enacted since 1979. It would have worked by now. Consider different options. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Tommy Martínez.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tommy Martinez.
And what items are you speaking on?
¿En qué puntos va a dar su
El
comentario?
punto número 9 y comentario público general.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
2 minutos, adelante.
Soy miembro del Distrito 14, miembro de ACE.
I'm a tenant of District 14 and an ACE member.
Hoy nos levantamos con una voz para pedir que fortalezca el LARSO de las siguientes maneras. Basar los aumentos anuales en el 60% del IPC, ingreso al consumidor.
Okay, so I'm here and we are lifting our voices as one people to ask for you to strengthen LARSO based on the following demands. That it is based on 60% CPI.
Limitar los aumentos de renta al 3% sin mínimo.
And to cap the rent increase at 3% with no minimum.
Eliminar los recargos por servicios públicos y ocupantes adicionales.
And to also remove the additional charges for utilities and for additional occupants.
Prohibir el banco de rentas.
And also no rent making.
Quizás ustedes piensen que unos pocos puntos porcentuales no importan mucho, pero les importa mucho a los cientos de miles de inquilinos que están viviendo del sueldo en sueldo.
And perhaps you may think just a couple percentage points aren't really going to matter, but they matter to us, to the people who are living paycheck to paycheck.
Sí son inquilinos que viven al día, importan mucho más de lo que creen. El reporte de la Mesa Redonda Económica es claro.
And so for us as tenants, these points are very important to us, and it has shown such through the roundtables.
Los propietarios les va bien porque sus ingresos han crecido más rápidamente que la inflación. Les pedimos que valoren más la sobrevivencia de los inquilinos, de la clase trabajadora, que los márgenes de beneficios grandes de los dueños.
And so you look at the landlords, everything's okay for them because their income has outpaced inflation. But for the rest of us who are working class people, we ask that you vote in our favor because we're the ones that are benefiting the landlords through what we're paying.
Les pido por favor que se toquen la mano en el corazón, tengan tantita empatía con todos los inquilinos. No queremos ver más gente en las calles, familias enteras, con niños en portabebés, en carriolas, tienen sus corralitos afuera en la calle. Yo no quiero estar en la calle, no quiero que mis hijos estén en la calle. Gracias.
And so we ask you to have a little compassion and to look inside in your hearts for the tenants who are suffering here. We don't want to see any more people, any entire families out on the streets, children, babies in their strollers out in the elements. I don't want to be homeless. I don't want to see my children being homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, and I'll call two more names, Ron Valentine and Leslie Meza.
Fred Sutton with the California Apartment Association, item number 9 in general public comment.
Okay, you have 2 minutes.
Will all the housing providers please stand again? We urge you to reject the proposed changes to the RSO. It will make the housing crisis worse. The city's study focused on how to tighten rent controls, but it never asked the fundamental question: is rent control the right tool to create affordability and expand access to housing? Of course not. Economists have long agreed that tighter controls reduce both the quantity and quality of housing. The real question before you today is whether LA should double down on a failed policy due to public pressure from apparently ACE and passion. Lowering rent caps and removing the shelter component would disconnect rent adjustments from the real costs of providing housing, creating an artificial formula that has nothing to do with real-world costs. And the circularity argument can be applied to any part of the CPI. There is no justification to removing housing. Supporters often point to other cities, such as Santa Monica and West Hollywood, the most expensive cities in the nation. They also leave out that the vast majority of cities in the state follow AB 1482 price gouging laws. LA is one of the most heavily regulated housing markets in the country. After a 4-year rent freeze, 2 eviction moratoriums, and endless new mandates, housing providers are avoiding investment here altogether. What Los Angeles needs is balance. Policies that promote new housing, encourage risk-taking. This conversation will not create a single new unit. Adopting these changes would be a short-sighted fix at the expense of a vibrant and inclusive city. The real political courage is having the strength to vote no on this. I do want to say one other thing. Thank you for calling out the speakers here. This is at least 60% of the people in here are housing providers, and it has been yellow shirt after yellow shirt. I am not sure how ACE has been called every single time up here. Thank you.
Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. Su nombre, por favor.
Buenos días, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María Osorio, pertenezco a ACE y vivo en Distrito 9.
Okay, what items are you speaking on?
Good afternoon, my name is Maria Osorio. I'm an ACE member and I live
What
in
items are you
District 9.
speaking on?
¿Y qué puntos va a dar su comentario, señora?
Voy a hablar del artículo 9 y comentario general.
I would
Okay,
like to
you have 2
comment
minutes. Go
on
ahead.
9 in a public comment. Adelante, 2 minutos.
Pues no voy a hablar mucho ni repetir mucho de lo que todos ya dijeron y de lo que ustedes saben desde ya mucho tiempo.
Well, I'm not going to repeat what has already been said and talk about things that you already have known for a long time.
Como ustedes ven, todos estamos aquí para pedirles que ya pongan en fuerza al ARSO y que por favor dejen al 3% la renta.
As you can see, we're all here to ask you to strengthen the LARSO formula and to set a cap at 3%.
Ese aumento que cada vez lo dan más alto año con año.
We're seeing the rents increase more and more year over year.
Y con esos aumentos, ustedes mandan a más familias a la calle.
And with more of those increases, you're sending other people into the streets to have to live unhoused.
Los invito a caminar a las comunidades de cada uno de los que representa un distrito para que se puedan dar cuenta la tristeza que da ver a tantas familias con babies, personas mayores de edad en las calles.
And so I invite you all to walk around these communities that you represent in your districts, and you can see the sadness, the families, the children, and the babies who are out in the streets unhoused.
Yo estuve 1 año y medio completito aguantando acoso, quitándome agua caliente, apagándome la luz, quitándome todo.
I had to live a year and a half under severe harassment where they were trying to take everything and take the hot water and everything.
Con 4 niños y 3 con necesidades especiales.
And I was living with 4 children, and 3 of them were special needs.
No se me hace justo que a ustedes el pueblo los puso en este lugar y los estén ustedes mismos mandando a la calle y no los estén protegiendo, manteniéndolos en sus hogares.
And I don't think it's fair for you to be representing the people, and these are people who are ending up having to be sent into the streets, evicted and kicked out with no protection.
Por favor, pónganse la mano en el corazón y piensen en todas esas familias, porque el derecho a tener un hogar creo yo que es un derecho humano y nos lo merecemos todos.
So please, I ask for you to look in your hearts, please, so that you can think about these families, because I truly think that housing is a human right.
Ustedes pueden darse cuenta, y todos los que estamos aquí, que desde la pandemia, ahorita con todas las redadas de migración, familias con papeles, sin papeles, todo el mundo está en riesgo de quedarse en la calle o de que los estén secuestrando y no estén con sus familias.
And so you can look around here and you can see that all the people here, since the pandemic all the way through until these ICE raids, whether they're documented or undocumented, we're all at risk of being evicted and ending up on the streets along with our families.
Por favor, voten ahora por ese 3%. Muchas gracias y que tengan buen día.
So I ask, please vote now. Vote yes on 3%, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Aló, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Tony Martínez y soy miembro del Poder Colectivo Comunitario.
Sorry, what's your name?
Un segundo, señor.
¿Cuál es su nombre?
Tony Martínez.
I'm Tony Martinez and I'm a part of Community Collective. Adelante. Perdón, Poder Comunitario.
Y soy miembro del Poder Colectivo Comunitario, residente de Boyle Heights, del Distrito 14.
And I am a resident of Boyle Heights, District 14. Adelante, señor.
Voy a hablar del punto 9, comentario público.
And I will be speaking about item number 9 as well as general public comment. Adelante, señor.
Y estoy aquí para pedir con amabilidad y cortesía que se apoye la ley Larzo en un aumento del 3%.
And I am here to graciously and respectfully ask you to support LARSO passing and the cap of 3%.
Ya que esta ley hace 40 años que no se actualiza y las rentas en Los Ángeles se han ido por las nubes.
Now that it's been 40 years since it's been updated, and the rents here in LA, I mean, they're scratching the heavens.
Es por eso que urge un stop a esto y poner un aumento del 3%.
And this is why we have to put a stop to this and cap it at 3%.
Además, al aumento del 10% por personas adicionales y los servicios públicos.
As well as put a stop to the additional 10% for additional people and for utilities.
Yo como persona pensionada, con mis ingresos, ya no sé si pagar la renta o comer.
And me as a retiree, a person on pension, I don't know whether to pay the rent or to eat.
Y como dicen los dueños, lloran mucho, pero a veces les dice uno, hey, necesito arreglos en mi unidad. Y ellos dicen, no estoy haciendo dinero.
And you know, just like the owners say, they come here, they cry a lot. But then when we say, hey, I need you to fix this in my apartment, they'll say, nah, we don't have the money for it.
Y están nomás como el asadón, haciendo dinero a sus bolsillos y a nosotros no nos atienden nuestras demandas.
And they're just there lining their pockets while our needs are not being met.
Pero cuando hay una elección para una elección gubernamental, ustedes sí nos exhortan a que salgamos a votar.
But when there is, you know, an election, you guys are asking us to come out and vote.
Pero cuando nosotros, la clase media, ocupamos que nos apoyen, nuestras peticiones, creo, caen en saco roto.
But then when us, the working people, the middle class people, come and ask for help, it falls on deaf ears.
Es por eso que exigimos apoyen la ley Larzo con un alto a las alzas de renta. Gracias.
That's why we are demanding that you support LARSO so that we can stop rent gouging. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker. Which items would you like to speak to?
Item 9 and general comment.
Okay, you'll have 1 minute for each. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jess. Since January 2020, almost 6 years ago, RSO rents increased around 8%. Wages, including minimum wages, increased 30%. During that time, basic industry housing provider costs, like insurance and repairs, have skyrocketed. From personal experience, utilities became so cost prohibitive, we had to hire a trash consultant to tell us where to move our cans to bring down premiums. It's especially important to note that deferred maintenance costs, uniquely impactful to RSO buildings, have more than doubled. There have been a tidal wave of tenant protections over the last few years, including but not limited to Tahoe regulations, caps on security deposits, restrictions on serving notices to pay, excessive administrative burdens, Tahoe regulations again for some reason, just cause protections, state rent control caps, extended time to file legal paperwork, free lawyers when people don't pay rent, and CARES protections. No other industry is expected to provide services and property for free for months or sometimes years at a time. No other industry has to fight opportunistic lawyers provided by taxpayer dollars when the other party fails to meet basic contractual obligations. And no other industry is faced with such a relentless erosion of common sense rights. Picking on workers and families that provide stable housing for the city is reckless. I urge you to come up with other ways to provide assistance to the few that really need it, rather than carelessly gutting much needed housing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jess. Next speaker.
Item 9 and public comment.
Okay, you'll have 1 minute for each.
All right. Stuart Waldman, I am president of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA, also a former landlord for 17 years until this council decided that my tenant didn't have to pay rent for a couple of years during COVID, and I was forced to sell, and now that is just a single family home, not being rented to anybody. The Consumer Price Index, all items should remain the CPI barometer the city uses. This should not change. The current CPI index is the standard used by most industries, governments, and is what the state uses for their rent calculations under state law. The shelter component is the most relevant part of the CPI. Removing it takes out the very element being regulated. Already, the current CPI does not encapsulate the rising cost of rental property operations. The city should not deviate from this basic barometer. Rent control advocates are calling for lower formulas than what the LAHD has put forth. Any changes the city adopts must be rooted in data, not passion. There will be efforts to try to create numbers and methodologies below what has been analyzed and proposed. This should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, and this will be, I believe, our last speaker. Go ahead. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Ron Valentine, item 9 in general comment.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
I represent over 1,700 people here in the County of Los Angeles who do make a good living. I want to say that I am in favor of a cap so that we don't see this increase. A good story is my 2 of 3 adult children did face a 10% increase 2 years ago over at the Las Brisas apartments in Woodland Hills. Basically put them out of housing. We had to move. It's hard for me to negotiate against huge employers like NBC, ABC, CBS to get an increase over 3%. So if the average person is making about 25 bucks an hour, they work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, comes out to $52,000. I get them a 3% increase, that comes out to about $1,360. If you're paying $2,500 a month, you get a 10% increase, that's 250 bucks a month. You start doing the math, that's $3,000 a year. We're only at 50%, and that's only on their gross increase. I am all in favor of landlords. I am in favor of the dream, the American dream to own a business, yes, of course, but there has got to be some sort of coming together and working together to make this work. If the landlords can't get tenants in there because they can't afford it, then there's no American dream. But we got to make this workable for both parties. But we are in favor of the 3% cap because I cannot get more than 3% negotiating against these huge employers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There were names that I called who haven't come up. Chelsea R. Clayton. I just want to make Leslie. If these names are, if people are here with these names, I just want to make sure all the names, because I know there were people who came up who weren't called, so I want to make sure the names that I called had a chance to speak. Jessica. Okay, all right. Well, with that, we've had now public comment for 1 hour and 10 minutes, so I'm going to be closing public comment. Thank you all for coming and providing your comments. Huh? Clayton? Okay. Clayton, we can have Clayton, and that'll be our final speaker. I apologize. Okay, go ahead. Your name and the items you're speaking on?
Hello, my name's Clayton. I'm speaking on the LARSO item.
Okay, so you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Cool. So I'm a UAW organizer and an elected member of DSA's National Political Committee. I help workers at USC form unions to win gains like increased pay, affordable health care, and protections from harassment and discrimination. I'm here to ask you to cap the rent at 3%. Firstly, thank you to Councilmember Rahman, who showed up to support USC graduate student workers during the contract campaign. We remember. We also showed up in 24 and 4th to make sure that candidates that support workers win their elections, and we intend to do the same in 26. But we need the council to continue showing up for us. Our members are bargaining for increased pay and things like that, and getting all of our gains from our contract campaigns like eaten up every year by increased rents is just untenable for us. And our members are watching this and really are paying attention and care about what happens here. So please cap the rent at 3%.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I will close public comment. Colleagues, I know that there are some media reports here, but I am going to recommend that we take all items except for item 9 on consent today, unless you have questions on any of the other items, Mr. Bloomfield?
Not a question, just one quick comment on one of the items. You don't.
Sure, go ahead.
Which is just if.
And if you could bring your microphone closer to you.
Yeah, in the emergency declaration, I noted that the report says that we may not get CAO reports after updates after the emergency order is lifted, and I just wanted to put it out there that I think it's important that we continue to get those reports even if the emergency is lifted. The crisis is still with us, and we're going to still need to get that information on a regular basis. I just put it out there.
Okay, I appreciate that request. The only thing I would, and that's item
That would be the item 5.
item 5. And the only thing I would say in response to that is the homeless emergency declaration had picked a certain set of criteria that it was reporting on that I think may not be.
I'm totally open to working with you to adjust the criteria. I just want to make sure that we're still getting, there's so much information
Yes.
that we need to be getting, and happy to adjust that, but I just didn't like leaving that out there that that obligation is suddenly gone because the emergency order is gone.
Right. I mean, I think the reality is that the urgency around this issue has not gone, and I do think that we need better reporting. So I take that point, and I'm happy to work with you on a form of regular reporting, quarterly reporting to this committee that I think incorporates some of the ongoing questions that we've been asking about homelessness. Okay, great. So with that, I want to move to vote on items 1 through 8 and 10 through 12 with amendments on items 8 and 6. So items 6 and 8 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for items number 4 and 5, would you like to note and file those items?
Yes.
And then just for clarification on the record, for item 6, the amendment was actually introduced by Councilmember Jurado, and I'll have it seconded by you, Councilmember Rahman.
Okay.
And then for item 8, the LHD amendment will be moved by you, Councilmember Rahman, and seconded by Councilmember McOsker. And then for item number 7, would you like to note and file the LAHD report and approve the recommendations in the CAO report?
Yes, that would be great. Okay, thank you. So with that, let's call the roll on those items.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And one more clarification. For item number 1, the appointee's full name is Eric Minoru Nakano. Councilmember Rahman.
Yes.
Councilmember Jurado.
Yes.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Hutt.
Yes.
Councilmember McOsker. Yes. 5 ayes, and these items are approved with 6 and 8 as amended.
Okay, so let's now move to item 9. And if we want to have our LHD and ERT experts join us at the table.
And item number 9 is a Los Angeles Housing Department report relative to economic study findings and drafting an amendment to the Los Angeles Municipal Code to revise the methodology establishing the annual allowable rent increase for the rent stabilization ordinance and related matters.
Welcome. And if you want to just introduce yourselves again, I think that will be useful for everyone. I know we've met all of you before.
It's Patrick Burns of the Economic Roundtable.
Right.
Daniel Flaming, Economic Roundtable.
Anna Ortega, Los Angeles Housing Department.
Robert Ghilardi, Los Angeles Housing Department.
Brian Kirkness, Los Angeles Housing Department.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I know this is a long-awaited discussion, and we had the opportunity to discuss the findings from this report a few weeks ago. And, you know, I think we're faced with some ongoing questions and discussion points now. I think this council has taken action in recent years in response to a market that has been fairly punishing for renters here in Los Angeles, and that has gotten increasingly so, particularly in the last decade. We have taken action to try and address some of these issues and to ensure that vulnerable renters here in the city of Los Angeles are protected. When we passed additional renter protections at the end of the COVID eviction moratorium, which was in place even before I got elected, we as a council actually had to work together to end that eviction moratorium, but to make sure that when we ended that eviction moratorium, that we weren't going back to, I think, what a lot of renters shared And what was deeply felt in the city was a system that had been relatively punishing for a lot of residents of the city. And we passed a number of protections after that and tried to make sure that the city's system was working better, not just for tenants, but for landlords as well. We've certainly tried to do that in my office as we've engaged with both landlords and tenants to navigate this new environment and to make sure that the system felt fair, and to make sure that the rules that we were putting in place were not overly burdensome for tenants or for landlords. I think that as we move through this, there will always be outstanding questions. And so I wanted to make sure, I know you were able to present the report last time. I wanted to make sure that questions that were raised that have still not got an answer had an opportunity to be raised at this time. And so I wanted to open up the floor for those who are at the table, if you have additional comments that you wanted to make, and then we can move it back to other members of the committee for additional questions as needed. Are there? I know a couple of questions came in. I don't know if you wanted to provide some feedback on those.
We're prepared to answer any questions that might come up from the members. I don't think we have anything in addition right now to the presentation that we made last time.
The same is the case for the Economic Roundtable. Thank you.
Okay, great. I know Councilmember McCosker submitted some additional questions and other members asked questions during the meeting last time, and I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity, if those questions were answered in full, then we can continue on to our discussion, but if there's still outstanding questions, I wanted to open up to other members to ask those at this time. Councilmember McCosker, I want to start with you because you took the trouble of submitting questions.
Yes, thanks very much. We did get responses to the questions just for the sake of the conversation and for the group. I had asked about LADWP and Southern California gas statistics over time and comparing it to the 1%, and I realize those are not the only costs that go up for any of us, but I am satisfied that I did get a response on the 1% annually compared to historic increases in gas and the 1% annually in the historic increases on LADWP. The 1% does exceed each year the amount that those items have gone up. And so I'm clear on that. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the next issue that I'd asked about. I'd asked about the sort of the stability, if you will, of the CPI minus housing, because I wasn't clear on whether or not CPI minus housing was always going to be, or what effect it would have. And it sounds like over the 40 some odd years, in 7 years, the all items minus CPI was actually higher. I mean, excuse me, all items minus shelter was actually higher. And that must have been years where there were high increases in other products and services and things that go into the all urban calculation. And oddly, in at least 7 of those years, shelter was less. In 22 years, the all items CPI minus housing was lower, and then it's been stable for 17 of those years. Do I have that right?
I'll just repeat it just for clarity.
Okay.
So we did look at the history of it, and in 7 years, as you stated, so there's been variability, but in general, in 7 years, all items less shelter has been higher than the all items index. The all items general has been higher in 22 years, so the majority of the time, the all items is higher. But in 17 years, they're about the same. So there's variability, but more often than not, the all items is higher than the all items less shelter.
And given that, just take that as truthful. You were looking quizzically at her when she was describing that. Do you still think that all items minus shelter is something that makes more sense than all items full or or a percentage of CPI?
I will comment and then give the Economic Roundtable an opportunity to comment. I think that logically, yes, because you're removing the cost of housing from the formula that calculates how much housing should increase. I will note, though, that our recommendations were made as part of a package. So all of the recommendations would work together. So if different recommendations are adopted, I think that the change in index becomes less critical.
My assessment is that the gap wasn't huge, so that the influence was modest, and that our thinking was based on trying to avoid circularity of having housing inflation feed more housing inflation, and by leaving housing out to look at the other portfolio of costs that go into the consumer in the economy. So I don't think it's do or die, but I think that there's more clarity to not having housing inflation feed calculations of how much housing costs should be increased, how much rent should be increased.
I can defer to others. I have a couple more.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask a clarifying question there,
Okay.
because I think we've heard from some providers who've reached out to our office and some of whom gave comment today about the fact that costs of housing are also driven by the expenditures of maintaining that housing, and that the housing, the shelter part of the CPI reflects that most accurately. So rather than it being circular, that it is actually more accurate of the costs that people are facing, and therefore more appropriate as a measure. And so I just wanted to kind of underscore that question, because that, I broadly understand what you mean by circularity, but we, not having seen other jurisdictions that use this measure, the fact that the cost of housing is driven by costs that impact housing makes sense to me too, and that should be reflected in the number.
But the CPI would include a lot of those other costs. I mean, it would include the cost of going to the hardware store and getting a gallon of paint. It would include the cost of hiring a gardener to mow your lawn. It includes a lot of costs that go into operating and maintaining a rental unit. So I don't think operating costs are being ignored by excluding the rent element of the CPI from the calculation.
Okay, well, I want to, Mr. Bloomfield, did you have a question on this issue, or did you have additional comments?
Different question, comment.
Okay, Councilmember Kosker, did you want to finish your line of questioning here, or you have additional questions?
Additional questions that don't relate to this.
Why don't we move to
minus
Mr.
shelter.
Bloomfield, and we can come back to you if that's all right? Or if there's other members with questions. Go ahead, Mr. Bloomfield.
However you want to do it. Just generally, I mean, I'm listening to the whole argument, and I certainly agree with the tenant advocates when they say the rent is too damn high, and that say that it's unfair when the inflation, however you measure it, is lower than what we allow landlords to charge. That creates an unfairness. Similarly, I hear the housing providers when they say that the costs are rising higher, faster than the price of being able to maintain an apartment, and that they feel it's unfair when the rent is artificially capped at a certain amount below inflation. Both of those realities I don't think are inconsistent. They are both true realities. For me, this whole measure, we're not going to solve either of those problems with this measure in terms of the rent being too high or the cost rising too fast. But that's not what the rent stabilization ordinance was designed to do. The rent stabilization ordinance, as I understand it, was designed to keep the rent at zero adjusted for inflation. meaning when you sign up a lease for the very first time, you're signing a contract, and we as a government are saying, for the rest of your time in that apartment, we are going to keep that increase, we're going to keep that rent the exact same / adjusted for inflation. But what does that mean, adjusted for inflation? And that's where I think it's very brilliant, your idea of banking, rent banking, because artificial caps or artificial floors, what they do is they make the actual cost not keep up with the real value. So when you do rent banking, what you're saying is, we understand that rent stabilization is meant to keep the cost at zero. But because the volatility of the increase in inflation, we want to smooth that curve out, and so that there's less impact on the tenant when it's over and on the landlord when it's under. So the rent banking, to me, makes a lot of sense because you keep true to the principle of zero increase adjusted for inflation, but you allow that to be captured over time. Last time I asked the question about rent banking on the low end, because I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if we're going to rent bank on the high end, meaning that if the rent is over our artificial cap, we're going to allow the landlords to recoup that over time so that they catch up with inflation, we should, in theory, do the same thing on the low end. And last time I raised it, I had different thoughts about it, saying, well, we hadn't thought about that, but it's doable. It's certainly the same kind of calculation. So I wanted to, again, ask that question. Would it be difficult to, if we're going to do rent banking, to do it fairly on both ends of the spectrum?
Thank you, Councilman. I mean, it's just math and tracking. So we do that all the time. We could track banking on the top end and on the bottom. There's only a need to rent bank at if it's under, if there's a floor. If there's no floor, then there's nothing to bank.
Right. Although in your proposal is a floor and a ceiling.
Yes.
With the rent banking. So I think you guys did a lot of great work to make that come together, and it is a balanced approach that you've come up with that probably nobody in this room who testified is going to like, because it's neither really heavily for the landlord or heavily for the tenant, but it is a fair change. But it does have a ceiling and it does have a floor. And so I guess I certainly am going to propose that if we take up your proposal, that we just make that one little addition, which is to do that, but with a banking on the low end as well. Obviously, if you lower it to zero, you don't really need banking, although technically you could if you have deflation, which we did have a couple of years ago, once. So I mean, even at zero, you theoretically could have rent banking. And given what's happening in the White House, I wouldn't put it past us to have some crazy highs and lows coming up in the next couple of years.
And I had a question about the rent banking issue, which I think you touched upon last time, that I just wanted to kind of underscore or hear more about this time. Rent banking, there's some complexity to it. And I'm curious about the Housing Department's capacity to be able to administer a program like the one proposed in the report, or one that has maybe even an additional component like what Councilmember Blumenfield proposed. Who would handle it? How would it be managed? And,
Yes.
how would it be monitored?
So Councilwoman, we do this already all the time. Not the rent banking part, but we calculate the annual allowable rent increase every single year. We've done it for 45 years. And it's not as simple as you think. It looks at the year that ended on September 30th compared to the year that ended 1 year before that on September 30th, and notes the rate of change and calculates the difference and rounds it up to a whole number. But we've been doing it for 45 years. The banking adds a component, and banking at the lower end adds a little bit more, but it's all entirely easily done by our staff. That is our job. We administer it, we figure these things out, we keep track of it, we publish it, we enforce it. If tenants feel that they're getting an excessive rent increase that's beyond what's permitted, we investigate those cases and resolve it. We publish these things widely. Right now, we're preparing for the annual bill for all RSO units, which goes out at the end of December. But normally, we publish what the rate is going to be for the next July. So it's just part of business for us. It's something we do, and, not to brag, but we're good at it.
Thank you for that feedback. And then
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
I wanted to speak also to the question of costs faced by landlords, which we heard a lot about today. In your research, how much of, we have a system in California where we also have, in addition to jurisdictions that have rent stabilization and rent control ordinances, we also have mandated vacancy decontrol in the state. And so I'm curious, can you just explain a little bit about how that works and how that impacts costs and comparable rents paid by RSO tenants versus non-RSO units?
I'll begin. So in the city's rent stabilization scheme, we control the rents for in-place tenants, and we publish and inform the public, landlords and tenants, about what the annual allowable rent increase can be. And so that happens for tenancies that continue. Whenever there's a voluntary vacancy or for cause, and there's a new tenant that comes in, then we have vacancy decontrol. And yes, by state law, we have to allow vacancy decontrol and the new rent for the new agreement between the landlord and the tenant to be set at market. So that's what we mean by vacancy decontrol. And at that time, landlords are free to set the rent at whatever level meets their needs and that the tenant is willing to agree to. So whenever there's a vacancy, there's an opportunity to reset the rent for that rental unit. We do not, and have never had in the city of LA, we've never had true rent control. We've had rent stabilization that protects tenants in place.
About half of the units turn over within 4 or 5 years. So vacancy decontrol happens pretty frequently in RSO units. And it takes maybe 3 years to really have a noticeable difference between RSO rents and rents for vacancy decontrolled units. So in the first couple of years, the thumb in the scale of the RSO ceiling doesn't have that, you don't see it that much. So for long-term tenants, it is a significant factor. For tenants who stay in their unit 10 years or 15 years, the difference is significant. But for the preponderance of units and preponderance of tenants, there is frequent turnover and the opportunity for landlords to adjust rents to market rates.
And what percentage of tenants are in their units for longer than 10 years versus, I know the number of turnover, you said about half of units turnover every 4 years or 5 years. The report submitted by California Apartment Association, I think, said something similar, 40% of units turnover every, it was either 3 or 4 years.
I have a comment about that report.
Yeah.
That talked about a specific data point, which is in 2020, and it said 40% turnover in 3 years. But the problem is 2020. 2020 was an anomaly because a lot of people, that was the pandemic, that was the stay at home, work at home.
But it wasn't that different from the stats that he also cited in, from
He
the.
said 3 years though, and that is different than when we have
You have
4 or 5
50%
years.
5 years.
4 or 5 years, yeah.
Okay.
So that wasn't a good year to use as an example.
I think that number is in the report. I have to find it. I don't remember it off the top of my head. So If I could take a rain check for a few minutes, I think I can find it.
That's fine. I'll move to other members who have questions. Councilmember Hutt, do you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it on? Okay.
Yes, but I think you just need to move it a little closer.
Closer?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. When you were talking about the annual report, I just wanted to ask a question about it. Does it make sense to include in the annual report the impacts on the RSO increase to tenants and landlords? So I understand that you have 45 years of data, but do we know what the impacts are on those humans?
Well, what I was referring to was the increases in the CPI and what was allowed, not so much on the impacts. It depends on whether a tenant is a long-staying tenant. The longer they stay, the more beneficial the RSO is to that tenant. On the landlord side, the more frequent turnover, the more they get to bring their units to market rents. On the other hand, depending, and for some landlords, especially small landlords, anecdotally we hear that their tenants tend to stay longer. That means that small landlords then have controlled rents for longer time.
Page 59.
Also,
Okay, I'll find it. Thank you.
also, for larger landlords, a tenant who's delinquent in their rent may not make as much of a difference. For smaller landlords, if there, let's say there's 4 units and one person isn't paying, that's 25% of the rental income that they're losing. So, it affects them a little bit differently.
So I'm asking, does it make sense to include in our annual report what the impacts are so that we have an idea of what the increase is to tenants and landlords, what it means to them? Just what you said, but put it in report style instead of...
Well, we can report on any measures that the council directs us to report. I think what you are suggesting is kind of more subjective and variable. We don't do a rent study every year, just when when matters come up where we need to conduct a special study.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Rahman, my colleague, was kind enough to find the graph in our report. Thank you. It's figure 36 on page 59. So do you want me to read out the share?
Please, and if you could just bring that microphone a little closer to you.
Yes. So 19% of RSO tenants have been in their unit 12 months or less, 9% 13 to 23 months, 25% 2 to 4 years, 20% 5 to 9 years, 16% 10 to 19 years, 8% 20 to 29 years, and 3% 30 or more years.
Got it. Okay, that's very helpful. Other questions from committee members? Councilmember McCosker.
I just want to understand something I think you said. For the current model, you're saying for RSOs with the floor as it exists and the cap as it exists, it takes about 5 years for us to see a difference between market and...
I'd say closer to 3 years to start seeing a different show.
And that's assuming, that's assuming that folks are making increases, are effectuating increases based on the current floor and keeping within the current cap.
Yes, and not every landlord does that.
And not every landlord does that.
Right, not every landlord increases to the maximum. You're correct.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Jurado, did you have additional questions or comments?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out, like, I've heard a lot of comments in public comment today about why do we treat housing so differently compared to other consumer products? And I just want to correct the record that this is not a regular consumer product that's on a shelf. We're talking about housing. That's why in the contracting laws that we have, it's not an arm's. That's why we have the duty of habitability in there, is because there's responsibilities that landlords have to their tenant to make sure that it's safe and clean and habitable. And that's what housing is. And it's a different, categorically different product than maybe a canned good on a shelf. And so with that comes different responsibilities and treatments and considerations. And even when we look at the CPI and the buckets in which this is put in as shelter, right? The cost of living, it has a different impact on someone's quality of life. And so I just want to make sure that when we are talking about that we don't conflate housing with other objects, because we can't minimize what it means to people and what housing is. And as public servants here, it is our responsibility, I think, to make sure that we continue to have folks that are housed and not homeless. And so considering this is of great importance to the city of LA, our renters, and I appreciate Council Member Rahman for putting this up for discussion, because I know it's not an easy one, and there is a delicate balance. But I was just wondering, you know, based on, I'm looking at kind of the data here and some of the costs for owners' expenses. And it looks like, you know, most of it is coming from insurance and other operational costs. Would a 3% increase cover all of the owner's expenses that they need for operations?
Our assessment was yes, that there is a significant buffer in income from rental property between operating expenses and the income that landlords receive, and that the ceilings that are proposed, for example, 3% or whatever, would be sufficient to keep up with costs in operating expenses.
So capping the rent at 3% would be sufficient to maintain the operating expenses. And you're talking about the cushion that a landlord or property owner has is the equity, I'm assuming, that they have. And for some of them, they may have paid off the equity of that building already.
We do not include the purchase of the property or the payment of a mortgage for refinancing in that calculation, because that, I think, can be seen as a kind of a counterpart to putting money into the bank or into a savings account. You're building an asset with the payments to purchase property. So we look at operating expenses separately from mortgage expenses.
Okay. And then I'm trying to think about all the things that the rising prices that maybe the city does have purview for. I mean, the utilities, obviously that's something that we're considering here at the city. We've raised the trash fees. But it still looks like even with the utilities as part of the operating expenses, these are still considerably nominal in terms of an expense to the landlord if there are utility increases. And the 3% should still cover those utility increases as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other, I mean, when it comes to insurance, vacancies, taxes, and contracts, to me, that seems like those are issues that may be outside of the city's purview in terms of providing the relief that landlords want. I mean, when we're talking about the rent stabilization ordinance, we're talking about being reasonable and providing relief for tenants. And maybe this is not the proper venue for certain expenditure complaints to be fought when we're talking about rents and when expenses on a balance sheet are not necessarily determined by this body, because I don't think we have any power to change the insurance rates in the city for landlords and for all those other things. We can do it for trash and electricity, but those kind of things are out of our hands, right? So I think the other things that I want to think about is, what does your data say about the small mom and pop landlords? How are they affected more or less than other landlords?
We did not find any indicators of financial stress for mom and pop landlords that were greater than large landlords. And I don't know if Ken Barr is hooked into this, into our audio. He also had some thoughts about that, but I don't know if there's a connection with him or not.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh.
Did you want to say anything about the mom and pop rent equity issue?
Oh,
Well, I
yes,
guess-
I'm sorry, I forgot that we had another researcher on Zoom. Welcome, Ken, thank you for being here. And you're zooming in from
Nearby Australia.
Australia. Okay, welcome. All right, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I'd say two things. There's a lack of, systematic data on small landlords. But a few things you have to look at. In the overall data, it shows that a substantial percentage of owners have owned their properties for a long time. The small landlords have gotten annual CPI. Before COVID, the small landlords were getting annual CPI increases. And, and also look at it in the picture that operating expenses are typically about 40% of the rental income. So I think some small landlords were hurt badly if they had tenants who they couldn't collect rent from because of the moratorium. But I'd say apart from that, which I don't think the rent stabilization ordinance can solve, they've been in a good position. The values of their properties have gone way up. They have gotten annual CPI increases. To put the insurance cost in perspective, after our study was done, well, actually, I just found it, it's just a few months ago, the Federal Reserve Board did a study on insurance costs, and it looks like the average is now about $78 a month per unit. And that might not be a perfect sample, I'm talking about for Los Angeles, but it gives you a sense of proportion. Let's say they went up in the past 4 years from, $40 to $80 a month. But you have to look that in perspective to, what an annual increase on a $2,000 a month rent is. So, I think some small owners, but, if you have thousands and thousands of investors, some are going to be in particular circumstances that are not good, and the regulation is impacting them. But I think overall, they've been in a good position.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken from Australia. I'll give a moment.
Any other questions, Councilmember?
Probably, but not right now.
Okay, I wanted to just ask again, and I know we went over this last time, but I wanted to make sure that we, because this question has come up over and over again in discussions about the RSO and overall about anything related to regulating tenancy and rental units. We don't have right now data available in Los Angeles that helps us differentiate between smaller landlords and larger landlords. Is that correct?
The housing department actually recently.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, so we are starting to get that data.
And tell us how you're starting to get that data.
We released a report, I want to say earlier this month, looking at differentiating between corporate landlords and different kinds of landlords. So that, let's see if I have a council file. Well, that answers some questions and poses additional questions for research. But there are methods where we can look at differentiating between true mom and pop or individual landlords versus corporate landlords.
And can you talk more about the data that you found and what are the methods that you're using for that?
I cannot, but it is in our other report that will be coming to committee soon, we hope.
Is there anyone else here who can speak to that question?
I don't believe we have the staff from that unit here today.
Okay. Councilmember Hutt, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. piggybacking on what the chair just said, are we tracking purchasing, corporate purchasing of mom and pop units or mom and pop properties?
Yes, we are looking at that, changes in ownership.
And are we able to have that in the next report? Is that a part of
Some
it?
preliminary data has been released, and we expect to have additional reports on that.
Thank you.
But yes, there is a trend, somewhat of a trend of having individually owned properties purchased by corporations.
By large corporations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Blumenfield.
Just following up on that trend, how is that related to this discussion? Is that, if we cap the rents, is that going to accelerate it or decelerate that trend? Do we think that this is a contributing factor?
Can I say something?
Some would argue that increasing regulation may accelerate that trend as individual owners give up, and we've had some testimony about that today, but as it becomes more difficult for individual owners, there's a risk that that would incentivize them to sell and, go on to some other endeavor.
Because anecdotally, that's what we certainly hear. And we also anecdotally I have the experience that the small landlords tend to be the ones who don't raise the rent all the time. I lived in a rental with a small landlord for a long time, and they were very good about knowing their tenants and not raising the rent. And a fear that I have is if we accelerate this trend, we're going to end up with more of the corporate landlords whose policy it is to just maximize every rental opportunity. Again, this is a balancing act that we have to deal with, and that's one of those issues that we really can't ignore either, and one that I'm concerned. But again, I think you guys did a decent job, a very good job of figuring out the balance in the report that you put together. So I'll put it back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I skimmed pieces of that report, the upcoming report on corporatization, and one of the findings for that report is that there have been a number of corporate buyers of rental housing in the single-family home market. And unless you have an ADU and your single-family home was built before 1978, your single-family home is not subject, I don't believe, to the RSO. Is that correct?
A standalone single-family home, yes, is
Right.
not subject.
So you can be a rental that was built before 1978 as a single-family home, but you're not subject to the RSO.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, so, and those are some of, there's been a lot of corporate purchasing of single-family home rental units, not just in Los Angeles, but actually across the entire country. And that's one of the trends that was identified in the report. The report also says, I think, that we need to do a lot more research in order to understand this topic, which is what we hear a lot today. But that trend is not going to be impacted by actions that we take today. Because
That's what I don't know.
Because it's not, the single-family homes are not covered by the RSO. It's not impacted by this at all. That's what I'm saying.
That trend. But
Yes.
the trend of the small mom and pop apartments could be,
Yes, we don't, yes, exactly. Ken, you had made a comment, but I think you said, may I speak, and then we spoke over you.
Well, I think you can look at it this different ways. You can say, well, if there are tighter restrictions, more small owners are going to sell. On the other hand, if there are less restrictions, it's going to be, more attractive to national investors. And this whole thing, I don't think it really has an impact, because this is a whole national trend of national investors and national companies buying all types of rental property, especially residential property, because that's a very safe investment.
Right. Additional questions? Councilmember McCosker, go ahead.
I want to go back to a question that I think the consultant answered. I want to ask housing. It goes to the issue of the floor being at 0. I had asked in my questions on the record, why, historically, why do we have a floor at 0? And I think it's probably practical political reasons. But in the answer, you also said that having a floor above zero, meaning, and what it means to me is that when CPI, on the rare occasion, is at zero or negative, there's still a number above zero that a landlord can raise their rent to. And your concluding sentence is it provides landlords with a predictable annual revenue increase to address expenses and encourages property owners to maintain and reinvest in their rental properties. And I think that that gets to the implied truth that there are costs over and above CPI to these properties, and I think we've heard about some of them. Is that your complete answer? Because I think I had heard the consultant say that 0 to something is going to cover all the regional expenses as long as it matches CPI.
As long as there's a floor that provides predictability to the landlord. Let me just say, rent stabilization provides predictability for both landlords and tenants. So tenants have had a cap.
So sorry to interrupt you, but 0 is a floor. Are you saying a floor above 0?
Yes, I am saying.
You're saying a number above 0?
Yes.
Is your definition of floor?
Yes. Yeah, I guess 0 could be a floor.
Right,
but,
right.
But we have had a 3% floor, so that's what I'm familiar with, and we're proposing a 2% floor to provide some cushion and predictability to landlords so that they have the opportunity to build reserves, to be able to maintain and improve and upgrade their properties. I think it's very important to remember that these properties are 45 plus years old, some of them 100 years old. They have old systems that need replacing. So this works in the context of an ordinance that was adopted that was always a balanced ordinance it says in its purpose is to protect both landlords and tenants. It protects tenants by providing stability and predictability and limiting excessive rent increases. And that's mainly what we recognize it for. But that floor also provides predictability to landlords and some ability to maintain cash flow and even build reserves in low inflation years in order partly so that they can build the reserves to replace major systems or other expenses that may come up, including city fees and so on.
Again, 0 could be a floor, and that's also very predictable. But what you're saying is that to the landlord, a number above 0 provides not only predictability, but some level of income, additional income.
Correct. And 0 is a floor, but I don't see a scheme where we deduct an annual rent increase, so.
Right, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's only happened once in 45 years.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I wanted to put a proposal on the table. Go ahead.
One more question.
Go ahead,
Just on
Councilmember.
timing.
Yes.
Again, I'm, as the new person on the committee, maybe you've been through this question before, but it really just goes to the timing.
Everyone except for, oh no. I'm new. Yeah.
She's new.
Yeah,
As the
2
new
very
people.
new, 1 somewhat new, and then.
So I'll share this question with Councilmember Hutt, I think. The timing of moving now, we know that in the structure of LARSO, there is the July 1 increases, and there's a period of time that you'll need to know what the rules are to provide that. I think we are acting now because post-pandemic, when the new members came aboard and we ended the moratorium, we had February 1st increases.
Yes.
And so now we are, as a practical matter, we are probably on a February cycle, even though the law says July 1. And how do we get to February if today we are having a debate and maybe soon we give instruction?
So whatever the council adopts, first of all, I think that it will be a relief to everyone, both landlords and tenants and LAHD, to have clarity. So, but whenever something is adopted, everyone will know, and going forward, any rent increases imposed would have the new rate whenever the council adopts it. So traditionally, the way the ordinance is written, we figure it out, what it's going to be. We figure that out every October. We publish it usually in January, and it goes into effect the next July 1st. But as soon as the council adopts the new rules, then any rent increases after that day will be under the new rules. It has to be at least 12 months since the prior rent increase. So you're right in that a great number of landlords probably increased the rent the first time they could after the moratorium on February 1st, 2024. So they have an anniversary date, because it has to be 12 months. So I suspect that many landlords and tenants will have a February 1st, 2026 anniversary date now. So they have to give 30 days notice. So they have to give it by January 1st. But legally, the new ordinance will take effect whenever it does, according to the process.
I see. So I misstated the way the roles and responsibilities really. If, let's say, hypothetically, I'm not suggesting this, that nothing changes, that we do what the city does, dither and talk about it, then for some folks, maybe a large number of folks, on February 1st, that next 12 months increase could be noticed, and that would be according to the rules as they are today on the books.
Yes, so right, it would be 3%.
And so if in a new hypothetical, we make a change to the current set of rules, it would behoove us to make those changes really as quickly as possible for the reasons you stated, but also because we could eliminate confusion for what's happening on February 1st for a great many people who got rate increases post-pandemic moratorium. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, as soon as the council adopts an ordinance and it takes effect, then everyone will know from that point forward what it's going to be. And yes, a lot of tenancies probably now have a February 1st anniversary from the last rent increase.
But landlords can make a decision as to whether or not they do that on February 1st because it's 12 months, or, again, I'm not suggesting that one way or the other, or they could also be watching this and wait to see what they're going to notice their tenants with.
They could. They have to give 30 days notice, so they'll have to do that by January 1st.
Okay, thank you.
I have more questions.
Okay, Councilmember Hutt.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions. What's the average turnaround from application to building permits for capital improvement program?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
We have provided some data in a different report. We probably don't have enough staff resources to process those as quickly as we would like to.
Thank you. And then my next question is, what is the average turnaround for just and reasonable rent increase program? And what do we do to make it more efficient and fair?
So we're looking at the just and reasonable program and trying to find recommendations to make it more efficient, explain it more to landlords. We actually just finished in October with J&R Outreach Month, so we conducted workshops in English and Spanish for landlords. We tried to promote it with the apartment association and the landlord groups to let them know that this program is available and how landlords may avail themselves of it. But we have recommended in a different report that we take a look at that and see if we can make it more attractive for landlords.
Thank you. And then one more question, Madam Chair. Do we have data on how many tenants currently live in RSO units and are cost burdened which meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income on rent?
Yes. About 64% of LA City residents live in are renters. 56% of renters are rent burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income for rent, of their household income. And 30% of renters are severely rent burdened, paying more than 50% of their income for rent.
I didn't hear your first 64%.
Of the city's residents are renters.
64% are renters, 56% of residents are rent burdened, or 56% of renters are rent burdened?
56% of renters
Are rent burdened, which means they pay more than
50%.
50%.
No,
and-
sorry. Which rent burden means they pay more than 30% of their income.
And then 30% are severely rent burdened, which means they pay more than 50%.
Yes.
And I think Councilmember Hutt specifically asked are those numbers specific to the RSO or generally for the city?
Those are general for the city.
Do you have it broken down in the RSO space?
We do not.
Thank you.
Okay.
And just to
are there
follow
oth-
up
Yes, go
on
ahead, Councilmember.
the question, is it, and even if you don't have it broken down, is it more in the RSO space or less in the RSO space?
Definitely more.
More rent burdened in the RSO space?
Yes, definitely.
Can you speak to that? Why is that the case?
Because I don't have the data in front of me, but generally RSO renters have lower incomes. They're living in older housing, so less desirable housing.
We have something in the study about it, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't, if you want to take a minute and come back, or you have it right away?
I have it here.
Okay, go ahead.
What we show in the study, this is figure 16 on page 27, is similar rents, similar levels of gross rent as a percent of household income for both RSO and non-RSO renters. Slightly higher for non-RSO renters, but overall, if you take the city's population of renters, the average renter in the city pays 45% of their income for rent. And so, and some of those would be very severely burdened. Typically, the lower your income, the more severely burdened you are.
And how recent is your data?
Pardon?
How recent is your data?
The most recent data is for 2022.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Am I reading it right? That on 26, leading into that, on average, over the past 3 decades, the rent burden for non-RSO households has been 4% higher than for RSO households.
Councilmember McCosker, I'm going to ask you to speak into your microphone.
Oh.
So sorry.
Page 26, rent burden, on average, over the past 3 decades, pretty recent, the rent burden for non-RSO households has been 4% higher than for RSO households, as shown on 16. Is that
Yes.
different than what
No,
Ms.
it's the
Ortega
same
just
as
said?
what I was just saying. There's a slightly more rent burden among non-RSO renters, but you can see in this graph, they're pretty close. I don't know if everybody can see it, and it's a long ways away to see it, but the lines are pretty close, and on average, it's, they're at about 45% of income being paid for rent.
And then your findings, and this might be an explanation too, I don't know if it is, non-RSO households are slightly more likely to have moved recently.
Yes.
The average income of non-RSO income is 22% higher, so they're just getting into expensive property.
Right, so the non-RSO renters are in newer units that have higher rent and also unregulated units. So they have both higher rent and higher incomes, but the net effect is a similar level of rent burden, slightly higher for the non-RSO renters.
So I had a question about Councilmember Harada, you had another?
I just want to follow up on that.
Yep.
So the rent burden seems to be equitable amongst all Angelinos who are renting, but in the long term, in terms of like economic stability for a renter, it seems like the RSO for a landlord and a tenant provides that stability because they move less often, they have a predictable rent increase, they have the predictability which honestly our markets require. And I think to Councilmember Blumenfeld's point, once this discussion reaches its closing, I think the market will be relieved, as you said, because we'll have an outcome in which we should be able to rely upon. Because I think based on my assessment and the briefing, this formula really hasn't changed, or the last time it was changed was a very, very long time. And this research will have to happen in another decade or so to see whether our increases are effective. And so I think in that regard, RSO units have such a big benefit on the long-term stability for both folks. And I think the opposite, when we come to a conclusion of this conversation, it won't have a chilling effect. In fact, I think it will have a relieving effect and hopefully will stimulate housing production because we'll have stability in our prices.
Thank you, Councilmember. I had a question about costs, because those costs have come up a lot. Can you talk about the pathways that landlords have to make repairs and to absorb costs for repairs or improvements that they need to make on their properties? I know that there are a couple of different programs that allow for those costs to either potentially be factored into rent. I know that there's a just and reasonable rent adjustment program, which is hardly used. Can you just talk about those different pathways and talk about the usage of them as well?
Sure. So we're talking, this whole conversation is about the automatic annual allowable rent increase that
Right, exactly.
the LHD publishes and landlords do. They don't have to apply or get permission, or they just have to comply with the maximum legal rent increase.
Right.
In addition to that, there are several programs that landlords can utilize through the housing department when they make upgrades and improvements to their properties. They include capital improvements, which is our most frequently used program.
And so what does that include? What is a capital improvement that can be?
New appliances, new rugs, new kitchen remodels, new bathroom fixtures, anything, any improvement that primarily benefits the tenant that has a 5-year useful life. So
That has a 5-year useful life?
Useful life, yes.
Okay.
And it has to be something that's permanently fixed in place.
Okay.
Can't be like patio furniture that you can move around. So it has its rules, and landlords apply to pass through a capital improvement. It has a maximum of $55 a month.
Okay.
It's amortized over 60 months, but collected for 72 months. So that's the most popular program. It's, one way that landlords can make upgrades to the property and pass those costs through in addition to the annual allowable rent increase. There's
so it's
others.
$55 a month that's amortized over how many months?
60 months.
60 months. Okay.
There's also.
And that program, how much is it used?
I don't have the numbers, but we get hundreds of those a year.
Hundreds is relatively small among the big housing stock, though, that you manage, right?
Yeah, but it's a popular program, and there's millions of dollars in reinvestment that landlords report that we're happy that they're upgrading their RSO properties by those amounts.
And does that include things like painting or?
Painting has special rules. They have to do a complete painting of the building. They can't just, repair. Repairs and maintenance don't count. It has to be upgrades, replacements of things.
Got it.
Another big one is the primary renovation program. That is for more expensive things, more systems, replacement of plumbing, replacement of electricity, number of big system replacements.
And what is the cost and usage of that program?
It's also a popular program. It requires a tenant habitability plan because this kind of work is more invasive. The maximum rent increase for that is up to 10% of the rent.
Okay.
So that's another program.
And
Then
how
another-
frequently is that used?
I don't have the yearly rate, but that is a popular program also.
Okay.
There's
And so that
also-
would be like an HVAC system renovation or
Yes.
yes?
Yes.
Okay.
New roof,
Plumbing, roofs.
new plumbing, new electricity.
And so this, I mean, all of these things have become more expensive, right?
Yeah, right.
But does this program account for those new expenses?
Landlords submit their actual costs, but it's capped at 10% of the rent.
So is there ways, are these included in the RSO as part, this is part of what is stated in the RSO in terms of the caps on, how many months or what's the percentage?
Yes. All of that is prescribed in different sections of the RSO, and there's rent adjustment commission regulations on that. We do training all the time and to provide landlords with information. There's a whole process,
And
landlords.
so if costs are increasing for improvements like these, are there ways to make changes to these programs that can adjust for new costs, that can help ensure that increased expenses for things like a new roof or a new HVAC unit that may cost more are able to be absorbed by landlords?
We could look at that. The maximums are also set by the RSO. So that $55 a month cap is set in the ordinance, and it would need to be changed by the council.
Okay.
What happens, though, is that if something isn't amortized, if the recovery isn't sufficient to get the full recovery that the landlord is entitled to, then we extend the amortization period so that the landlord ultimately gets everything that they're entitled to get, but it might be over a longer period of time.
And you're able to have that flexibility in these programs?
Yes.
Okay, so are these pathways to be able to absorb some of the additional costs that we've
Yes,
heard about?
Absolutely.
And are these pathways that are utilized right now by the housing department in the city of Los Angeles to help address these increased costs?
Yes, we have a whole section that, that reviews and approves rent adjustments. It has its whole process. Decisions can be appealed by either the landlord or the tenants that are affected. So, yeah.
Okay.
There's also, I didn't mention, there's seismic. It has
Oh,
slightly
right,
different
seismic.
rules, seismic retrofit.
And that can be addressed through these same two pathways?
It has its own separate rules, but yes, it also is another program that landlords can utilize. Seismic isn't voluntary for landlords, it's mandatory, so they have to do that improvement, and then there's an avenue for them to recover the cost.
Okay, got it. Thank you, that's very helpful. Councilmember McCosker?
Thank you. Thanks for all of that. But how does it relate to just and reason? I mean, these are very specific programs.
That's right, I didn't ask about that. I asked about that, and then we didn't follow up on that. Thank you.
So we are both asking, how does this relate to just and reasonable? Just walk through just and reasonable, and I'm going to ask about the frequency of its use.
Okay. So the programs I just talked about depend on the landlord making upgrades and improvements, some physical thing. Just and reasonable is a different program. It does not depend on the landlord improving the property. It's a financial review of the property, comparing the return on the property in prior years to the current rate of return, and measuring whether the return has kept up with the CPI. So we use the same CPI tables that we use for the annual increase, but we use the actual CPI. And if it has not, if the landlord is not obtaining the return that the CPI would indicate, they are able to increase the rent to make up that difference. I will say it's not a very frequently used program. We often find that the typical thing is...
Sorry, Anna, if I could just underscore that. Can you say, when you say it's not a typically used program, you shared some very low numbers for its usage. Could you just underscore how little this program is used? Because I think, I put in a motion about this program this morning. in part because I knew that this discussion about costs was coming to this committee. And I know that there's a lot of challenges right now for people who are facing higher costs. We're all talking about rising costs. It's a feature of our life in America right now. So I'm very conscious of that. We do have a tool through this program to be able to make adjustments, but it is not used. So could you share the numbers?
Okay, I don't have them in front of me, but we get 2 or 3 applications a month.
It's nothing.
It's nothing in a universe of, 100,000 RSO properties. It requires a financial review and a comparison. There are things we could update in the rules that might make it more attractive, but it requires landlords to share their tax information and their financial information. I don't know if that's part of the problem. I suspect that it is, that they are unwilling or not comfortable sharing their financial information. But it is available. We typically find that a mom and pop elderly owner has owned a property for many years and hasn't increased the rent as they could under the RSO. So, we assume that landlords increase it every year like they're allowed to, but that's not the case. So you wind up with what we call historically low rents. And then if the original landlord, landlady dies, the kids inherit it, and they start looking at maintaining the property or what they're going to do with the property, and they find that they're not making money, they might be losing money. Anyway, so the just and reasonable process exists in order to maintain a minimal return in line with inflation.
I will say, as a former tenant's attorney, I did represent a tenant who was fighting a just and reasonable increase, and his rent, after living there with his wife in a rent-controlled unit for 18 years, increased from $995 to $1,408.78. So that was a 47% increase, and it was decided that it was just and reasonable, and they had the documents and the financial documents to prove it. And I wasn't able to fight this. So it was one of those like city-sanctioned programs that does protect the landlords through the RSO that was pretty successful in terms of providing landlords that relief, given that they showed those costs.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Blumenfield had a question. Councilmember Kosker, were you, because I have a couple of additional questions about this as well, but go ahead.
As a follow-up question, I didn't quite follow you when you were saying fair and reasonable means CPI doesn't keep up with, could you state that again? When you're under this program, which is presumably in response to state law, which requires a fair and reasonable rate of return, how are you defining fair and reasonable?
So the theory is that when the rent stabilization was adopted, so before there were any rules restricting the rents.
1985.
Pardon?
1985.
1979.
Oh, okay. What was the 85? Was the
that was the last time we
changed formula?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, but before we had rent control, presumably landlords were making a profit or keeping up. So they should have been able to keep up with CPI in all the years after that. They should have been able to increase the rent sufficient to keep up with a CPI.
The profit should have increased along with CPI?
That's what the return.
The return, and that's the definition? Is that the legal definition of what fair and reasonable is?
We look at net operating revenue minus net operating expenses, which gives us net operating return. Revenue minus expenses equals return. So, and we adjust it by the CPI for whatever number of intervening years there are. Now, mind you, it's probably the landlord's choice that during those years they did not increase the rent, because they could have. But for whatever reason, they are not obtaining the return that the CPI would indicate they should be obtaining on their rental property. So they can apply to adjust it.
what I don't understand, it sounds like under that framework, any capping of the CPI, assuming that expenses stay the same or go up, would automatically be less than fair and reasonable.
No, but we're not using the RSO annual amount, we're using the actual CPI percentages.
And what's the difference? When you're saying the actual CPI,
Yeah, the actual CPI, we're not using what's allowed under the RSO, that's artificial, because it's got a maximum and a floor. We're using the actual.
right? So the actual CPI
Yes.
is going to be higher
Potentially.
than the limited CPI.
Well, except in those years when it's less than 3%.
Except for but
Yeah.
on the high end, in most years, this is it's not computing with me here, which is that it sounds like if you're capping, if you're capping the rent, which we already do, and we're doing this formula, and you're not keeping up with that because it's capped, then under this definition, you're not meeting a fair and reasonable return under this definition. So that's why I don't understand that.
No, well, so we do use actual CPI, forget the RSO restrictions. And remember, in all these years, there is vacancy decontrol, so there may have been opportunities for the landlord to set the rent at market. But we're looking at what is the return today versus the potential adjustment per the CPI. And if they're limited, if they don't have a rent that recovers the full amount that they would otherwise be entitled to, then we can help them adjust it.
But isn't that by definition everyone?
No.
Because if you're above the cap, in a year where the actual CPI is higher than the capped CPI, whatever that is, whether it's 8%, 6%, 3%, someone could come to you and say, well, we're not making up. We've been artificially limited to this amount. Actual CPI is this amount.
So you don't look at just 1 year, you look at a base year and a current year.
And what's the base year?
As far back as they can, as they have records, so it could be as far back as 1979 or as far back as the records exist.
As far back as the rent or what?
Councilmember McCosker had a clarifying question.
I mean, this is, it's not, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't quite make sense because I would think if you actually looked at that on most rent-controlled apartments, the actual CPI is going to be much higher than what people are allowed to charge at this
So
point.
here's I think the reason why there's a divergence here is because there's turnover. And when there's turnover, the units reset at market rate, which has been significantly higher than CPI, right? So I think that's where at least some of you're right, what you're saying makes sense, but because there's 40% of units turnover every 4 years or whatever the figure was,
right. Well,
then
maybe it's only true for units that are 5 years old, but most units that are, in that range, you said there's a whole range that are 29, 30 years old. If people took advantage of this program, they would be.
But what's happened in the applications we get is that landlords could have increased the rent by the allowable percent, but they didn't. For whatever reason, they like their tenants, they didn't
and so
know.
then in those cases, you don't provide the adjustment?
Yes, we do. That's typically when they qualify because.
But even if they did, after 5 or 10 years, there's going to be that differential. I mean, I understand it if the units just turned over recently and you have a higher market rate than what CPI would have been.
So it doesn't apply to most units. It's just for units where there's historically low rents or for some reason the property owner hasn't increased the rent by the amounts that they could have. Because if they had, there wouldn't be a gap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor, but the way I'm understanding it, it would actually apply much more broadly
Yes.
if people took advantage of it. They would there would be a huge universe of people who,
Right.
of landlords who could take advantage of this, because under that definition,
So
most
they have to
units
give
are
us the
probably.
records? They have to give us the records from the base year. They have to provide their tax information.
Maybe they don't do it because it's too much bureaucracy, I get that, but and I understand only 2 applications a month is nothing, but the intellectual problem is what we're saying on one hand is a fair and reasonable rate of return is very different than what we're saying on the other hand with our motions here with what we're allowing for a fair and reasonable rate of return. So and that term is a state term that's defined, and we shouldn't be making it up.
Right.
There should be a solid definition of what that means. It's not up to me to make it.
We're not making it up, and it's
No,
a
I know you're not.
provision in every rent control jurisdiction in the state because it's required.
Councilmember McCosker had a clarifying question, but we can come back to that because I think this is important to understand. Go ahead.
It's along these same lines. So if the just and reasonable measurement is the number of years that the landlord can show us, well, let me back up and say, our experience with this is within the construct of our current ordinance, which has the Ana Ortega floor, if I can call it that, something above 0. So by definition, CPI is something. It's always going to be a number.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be below the Ana Ortega floor, and sometimes it's going to be above the Ana Ortega floor, and sometimes it's going to be above the cap. And my sense is that a couple of things are happening here. One is at vacancy decontrol, we go back to market,
Right.
and then you have a course of years, and sometimes it just comes out in the wash. CPI is 1%, and they raise it by 3, and then the next year CPI is 7, and they or whatever, and they that it evens out over time.
Yes, I think
And
that's true.
I think that and CPI is full CPI in our current ordinance.
Yes.
And so I think we just need to think about a floor that is lower and a cap that is lower and the potentiality of a CPI that's less than 100% CPI. We might be creating, and I'm not arguing against it, but we might be creating on day one someone who qualifies, or year one, someone who qualifies to come in and say, just and reasonable, I'm below CPI already.
Could be.
By its very nature, if you're 60% of CPI year after year after year, and let's say it stays within the window, whatever the window is, in year one, you have an argument that I'm 40% below.
Yes, I see that.
And I will ask this question, and that's maybe a more important question. Why do we do just and reasonable? Is it constitutionally required?
Yes, it's required because rent control jurisdictions can't take the landlord's property, and if we make them lose money, that's a taking. So it's an element of the RSO, not just ours, but all rent control jurisdictions that provides the landlord recovery on their rental property.
So just and reasonable is not out of the goodness of our hearts. It's actually makes the whole construct lawfully sustainable?
I'm sorry.
Just and reasonable is not out of the kindness of anyone's heart. It's because that's that is an escape valve that's required to make the whole construct lawful?
Yes.
So let me just ask a question here. So you said there's 2 applications a month for this program, and I think you provided some data at some point that you had something like 40 applications in 2024, not all of which were approved for this just and reasonable rent adjustment program, right? Are there other jurisdictions that have similar programs? Because a number of the jurisdictions around us actually have more aggressive rent stabilization ordinances, lower percentage of CPI, lower rent cap, lower floor. How many people in those jurisdictions are applying for these programs, and how many of them are getting their rent adjusted? Anecdotally, I've heard it's many more. Ours is shockingly low, so I just wanted you to speak to that.
So we would have to do more research on other jurisdictions. They do all have some provision. We call our thing just and reasonable. Others call it fair return.
Sure.
It's the same concept.
Right.
But we'd have to do more research about how many applications the other cities get. They all do have the provision.
And so, underscoring Councilmember McCosker's question again, he was saying on day one, you'd be setting up the situation, right? Where if you put it at a percentage of CPI and you had a cap that was lower than the actual CPI, would you need multiple years in order for this provision to be utilized? I mean, what is the...
Yeah, you need at least 2 years, a base year and a future year. And it's hard to say that in a short span of time, it's hard to say that you're not keeping up. But as the years go on, yes. What we typically have is a long-time tenant where the landlord hasn't increased the rent and there hasn't been turnover in the unit.
Sorry, say that again?
What we typically have in these applications is a long-term tenant where the landlord has not increased the rent.
Okay.
And the tenant's been there, well, I said that already. The tenant has a long tenure.
So this is like for the 8% of tenants who've been there 20 to 29 years, this is where
Right.
you're doing it? Or for the 3% of tenants who've been there longer than 30 years? Or
We call it historically low rents, and that's the typical kind of application that is approved.
But even there, 8%, 9%, 3%, these are still huge percentages of the population. If we have 150,000 or so buildings and a 680,000 or so units, something like that, right?
We have about, I want to say 100.
Am I misquoting these numbers?
It's close. It's like 100,000, 110,000 properties and about 651 units.
661,000 units.
Sorry, I'm going to say closer to 100,000 properties and 651,000 more or less units.
And even there, if you were looking at this, if 20% of those units have long-staying tenants who are obviously going to be below market rate, you'd still expect to see many more than 2 applications a month.
Well, I think it depends on whether the landlord has imposed the annual allowable rent increase. The problem is when they don't increase the rent for a long time.
Except that most of the rent increases that are happening, I mean, most of the money that landlords are making is coming from vacancy decontrol. I mean, that's the reality of a lot of what these studies are showing, is that turnover is where you make money.
Right, so but
turnover is where you reset at market rate. Turnover is where,
Yes, so then it's not historically low rent because it's been adjusted at some point, at some recent time.
So look, I appreciate that. There are other, sorry.
I had one last comment.
Is Ken trying to say something?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
hold.
Yes, yeah. I want to put this in perspective, and I've worked on fair return standards from back in the 80s, and my articles have been cited by the state Supreme Court a lot. Basically, I think, first so you understand it, the fair return standard is whatever net operating income you had as of a base year, and net operating income is gross income minus operating expenses. Whatever that net operating income as of the base year, adjusted by the CPI, is a fair return. So let's say you had 300,000 in the base year.
Could you say those last 2 sentences again? I'm sorry. Just want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The way fair return is defined is the fair return is your base year net operating income, whatever that is, adjusted by a CPI factor. So let's say in the base year you had $300,000 net operating income and the CPI has gone up 50% since then. Your fair net operating income is now $450,000. That's the way the standard works. What happened was, fair return is a constitutional standard. The courts have said you can use different kinds of formulas, but this type of formula that Los Angeles has has become the standard formula. What happened was, before vacancy decontrol was passed by the state, there were a lot of fair return applications in Santa Monica, Berkeley, whatever. After vacancy decontrol was adopted, the rents were going up fast enough so that your net operating income was growing more than the CPI, and fair return applications became very rare. That's the reality. And if you go back to 79, there are not many landlords who the net operating income has gone up less than the CPI. So that's why these type of, increases, are rare. And when you have to look at this, I mean, the vacancy decontrol, when you're looking at the profitability, it's the elephant in the room. And as you can compare this with mobile home park rent control ordinances without vacancy decontrol, they get a lot of fair return applications, but not apartment rent controls. It hasn't happened in other cities. That's what's happening with the fair return standard. And the courts have held that fair return is a constitutional minimum. That's what they've held.
Okay.
And what's...
That does clarify, sorry, Councilmember Blumenfield.
I'm sorry, just as a clarification, when you say net operating income, what is that besides rent?
That's the rental income minus the operating expenses. Mortgage payments are not an operating expense.
Okay.
That's an investment expense.
And that's a state, that's how the state has said it's appropriate to determine fair returns.
On day one, when you start renting that apartment prior to 1978, whatever year that was, the amount that it cost you to operate, the amount of rent you're getting minus the amount it costs you to operate, but the amount it costs to operate can go up every year. Is that also inflated by CPI?
No, that's inflated in the fair return process. That's determined by real numbers. You look at your actual operating expenses in the base year compared with the rental income. That produced the net operating income in the base year. Then for the current year, you look at the actual rental income and you look at the actual expenses rather than saying they went up by the CPI. So if they went up more than the CPI or less than the CPI, you're looking at the actual net operating income in the current year and comparing that with the base year, inflation adjusted.
So the cost of a manager, the cost of upkeep, those kinds of things.
Right. All of that. And it's possible that, the operating expenses can go up more than the CPI. But because of vacancy decontrol, there haven't been fair return applications.
Yeah, vacancy decontrol and increasing demand and not very much increases in supply. I mean, that's really what has happened, so.
Right, well, those are the bigger market factors.
Yes.
When you say state law, there is no state law that defines fair return. It's a judicial concept.
Right.
You have a regulation that defines fair return.
Right. But I'm saying that this version of fair return, which excludes mortgage, but is a judicial concept that has been held up.
Yes, it's been upheld over and over. In fact, the courts have said if you discriminate in setting allowable rents based on mortgage payments, that has no rational basis. That two landlords shouldn't be allowed to charge a different amount of rent dependent on their mortgage payments.
Right. Okay. Colleagues, unless there's additional pending questions, I wanted to make a proposal for our discussion. And I think, as many of you know, I'm deeply concerned with the question of affordability and how much it costs to live in the city of Los Angeles. That's why I have been the most vocal advocate, certainly on this body, about the need for more housing in LA. We need more supply, and when we can get more supply, vacancy decontrol will not result in massively increased costs for rent. But we haven't done that as a city. We have not built enough housing. We've built nowhere near enough housing. And the cost of rent in this city has skyrocketed out of control. It is absolutely enormous. And it has changed how people live and operate in the city. I think, I feel like we have closed off avenues for people to come here and really build their lives here. And it has been bad for LA. It has been bad for LA. It's been bad for the city's resilience. It's been bad for the city's creative economy. It's been bad for the city's economy overall. We are sending families out of this city. I'm seeing drops in enrollment in my public schools across my district. We're seeing the impacts of this play out as the entertainment industry becomes more uneven, that people are choosing not to pay the rents and the costs that they're facing to live here and are leaving LA instead. And I hear this over and over and over again. And I see this from older renters and I see this from younger renters. And because our system has been designed with vacancy decontrol in it, and because so much of the incomes that landlords get have been driven by vacancy decontrol and by resetting at market rate, I think what is before us is an opportunity to adjust costs for renters that, to me, is long overdue. And I want to put a proposal before us, and we can discuss this, we can talk about this, and I know this is lower than what the LAHD study proposed, the recommendations, but to me, this feels like an appropriate place to start our discussion because of the immensity of the challenge that we are facing in Los Angeles. So I want to talk about the following amendments to the RSO, which is to establish a floor of 0 for annual RSO rent increases and a ceiling of 3%. I want to amend the percentage of the CPI to 60%. I want to delete the provision for 1 or 2% increases for gas or electricity. I also want to delete the provision, to amend the code to ensure that additional dependents don't trigger an additional rent increase of up to 10%. That's, if you have a second kid in your RSO unit, you shouldn't have to pay another 10%. That's just my feeling. I had twins, so. And I think we need to increase funding for existing and new residential repair, maintenance, and rehabilitation programs for smaller landlords. We have programs that are in place, but they don't have that much money in them. And we should be looking at all available resources, including ULA and La Casa dollars, which are sources of funds that we have now that are designed specifically for preservation, to stave off some of the bad outcomes that could potentially result from this. And so I wanted to put these set of proposals before us. I would appreciate a second from someone on this. Thank you. And I want us to be able to discuss these proposals, I want us to be able to discuss these proposals in this committee and then hopefully send them on to full council in a timely fashion. I also do want to say that we can do this, but until we address supply, and this council has not done enough to address supply. We may have done more than the rest of LA County, but this is LA City, and our resilience depends on us building more. We have to build more. We have to make it easier to build. We have to make room for people. We have to allow more people to live in this great city. This doesn't negate that. In fact, it makes it all the more important that we have that conversation. So I want to just push us to think about that as well. And the final thing I just want to say is this morning I put forward a motion along with Councilmember McCosker to push us to look at the just and reasonable rent program. To me, what I'm hearing from this is not just that maybe the program, because of vacancy decontrol, is not adequate or is not needed as much, but that it also may not be structured effectively to help landlords who need that program. It may need to be easier to apply to. It may need less bureaucratic requirements. I'm not sure what's wrong with it, but I think we need to make sure that it is working better because that feels like a mandate that the city has to meet, and we need to make sure that our program to do that work meets the requirements that we have set before us and that landlords are expecting. So with that, I wanted to open the floor for discussion for this proposal. Councilmember Bloomfield.
First, a clarification. Are you including banking in your proposal?
I have not included banking in my proposal. I have not.
Okay. Because I think banking was a really good idea that the department came up with, and conceptually for me, that's really important because I think we do need to be smoothing the impacts as all the reasons that you stated on tenants. But banking allows us to basically keep the actual cost increase to 0. And when we don't bank, what we are saying is when it is above the cap, we are saying that it will be lower than the actual value is lower than what folks are receiving at that moment. So for me, that's a very important piece to this, just as sort of a fairness, again, of what I believe the RSO is about. All the original statements that you made in terms of the need and where we at, I mean, I completely agree with. It's just different approaches in terms of where we go. And so I would like us to continue this discussion and just for the procedurally, what I'd like to do is have a substitute motion, which I know we'll lose, but to put it out there just so that there is a minority report, which would be what the housing department proposed along with banking on the low end, which is a small point, but for me conceptually is important. So I'd like to get a second on that, even if it's a courtesy second, just to keep that discussion moving. And
I will second as a courtesy.
I appreciate that. And just to speak to, you know, I hear you on the 0.6%, although I actually liked what the housing department came up with, which is very similar to the 0.6 in practicality, but conceptually what they did is they removed that feedback loop of the housing costs, which to me that makes a lot of sense to do in terms of I understand the reason why you would remove that feedback loop, even though the counter argument is that we do everything else in the city with CPI. Why are we creating something different for housing? And I get that too. But at least on the way that the housing department changed CPI, and what CPI is just is a approximation for inflation. We're all saying that we want inflation to be accounted for in the rent increase, and then the question is how do we measure that inflation? And you're saying a fair way to measure it is a portion of it, 0.6%. The housing department said a fair way to measure it is by removing the feedback loop, and I'm sure the housing providers would say that the fair way to do it is to actually just use CPI. So I tend to fall down on where the housing department came, which is removing that feedback loop, even though occasionally that would mean it would be slightly higher, but on balance it would be lower, but at least it would be a fair application and not a sort of arbitrary. To me, the 0 to 3 and the 0.6 is very arbitrary. Maybe I could get there on a 0 to some number if the banking was involved, but without the banking, I can't get there. So I just put that out there to say my piece and also have that motion just to keep procedurally this going for the full council.
Absolutely. Councilmember McCosker.
Thank you very much. First of all, I appreciate all of your comments about the need for additional housing. Agree completely. I also know that we have such expensive housing costs for so many reasons. It does drive folks out of our jurisdiction. I appreciate that very much. What I'm concerned about is this whole discussion that we had about the requirement for a reasonable rate of return or just and reasonable. And I suspect from the answers that the reason why we have so few applications is that the number currently is above 0 and the cap is higher than the motion or the staff report. I think that's what puts us there. I will say in responding, I made a courtesy second on the motion, on the substitute motion, which I will vote no on. But I appreciate that it brings a discussion forward to the full council. I believe that we need a floor that's above 0. And I think that we need a cap that is lower than the staff report, certainly lower than what we are currently. So I think what's valuable here is that it strikes me that there's probably going to be a majority motion that goes forward, and there's going to be a substitute motion, and I think we need to get to this to the full council floor and vote on it. But I do not want to put us in a position, colleagues, I'm not speaking to them, colleagues, I do not want to put us in a position where we set up a system, well-intentioned, that on day one, or the first 365 days, puts us in a position where by definition, folks are below a CPI rate of return, and that we cannot satisfy the requirements of the state case law. So I am going to vote no on both motions. I'm going to be on the council floor, and I'm going to be arguing for a low cap and a floor above 0. So I just want to explain myself.
I appreciate that, and I just wanted to ask our experts here, maybe Ken might be the more appropriate person to direct this question to. Other jurisdictions have similar similar boundaries to what is in my motion, and I'm curious about whether they face the issue that Councilmember McCosker is identifying, which is they're instantly in violation of this just return judicial standard.
No, well, the other jurisdictions have had, I think, virtually no fair return applications. They're very rare. I haven't checked with them recently. And actually, it's a complicated area of law. The fair net operating income standard and your just and reasonable return standard is that the net operating income rose by the CPI. Well, the courts have held, mainly in the mobile home park cases, because that's where it comes up, that even if the net operating income is growing at half the CPI, it's a fair return. So it's a constitutional minimum. It's above the minimum you have for zoning, which is any viable use of the property, but you know, that's what the status of the law is. You're in compliance with the law as you are now. And the only thing that would drastically change things, nobody suggested this, is if you change the base year and made it more recent, let's say 10 years ago, rather than putting it all the way back to 1979. You know, that could have an impact. So landlords who, let's say in the last 10 years have gotten rent increases that are less, don't allow their net operating income to grow by the CPI would get some, relief. But going back to 79, it's pretty rare that somebody's net operating income hasn't increased by the CPI unless they just haven't been increasing rents, which happens in some cases.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful to understand. Okay, colleagues, in the interest of moving us along here, I think if we can take a vote on Councilmember Blumenfield's proposal. Is there a proposal that you wanted to make? No, just, okay. And then if we could take a vote on my proposal, and then I think this conversation, I was hoping, you know what? Let me leave aside my comments. I imagine that this conversation will be held very robustly in full council as well. And I understand that my perspective on this issue, which is, I'm fanatically focused on affordability in LA. It is the lens through which I view all of my work. I understand that perspective is not totally shared by the entire council, and I will look forward to the discussion there. So let's, if we want to take a vote on Councilmember Blumenfield's proposal.
So before we vote, Madam Chair, can we just clarify what the recommendations would be for each motion from each of the committee members?
Mine is simply what the Housing Department put forward, which is the 2 to 5, right? 2 to 6, I forget.
With rent banking on both, with the amendment that you want to add rent
Right,
banking.
with one additional amendment, which is adding banking on the low end as well as the high end. Right now we have banking if it's above the cap, and it's saying allow for banking below the cap as well. But otherwise it's identical to what the Housing Department has put forward.
So this would be to approve the recommendations in the LHD report as amended by what you just stated. Is that correct?
By adding in banking on the low end as well.
And would you like to vote on that?
Yes,
Okay.
please, if you could call the roll.
Councilmember Rahman.
Nope.
Councilmember Gerardo.
No.
Councilmember Bloomfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Hutt.
No.
Councilmember McCosker.
No.
4 noes, 1 yes. This does not pass.
Okay, great. And so I invite you, Councilmember, sorry, if we could, I'm so sorry, we really can't hear each other and just want to maintain a respectful discussion here. So I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm, but just want to make sure that we're being respectful. Councilmember Blumenfield, I want to, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to invite you, I know that there's an opportunity to submit a minority report from the committee, so I know this is a topic that will yield further discussion in full council, so I want to invite you to please submit that. I've done that as a member of this committee in the past into full council, and actually had very positive results from that. So I want to just invite you to do the same.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
And so just confirming you would like a minority report for that, Councilmember
Yes.
Bloomfield. So pursuant to Council Rule 69, the minority report is submitted for informational purposes only and will be attached to the council file unless by adoption of a motion is substituted for the majority report. And then now we can vote on Councilmember Rahman's amendment. And can you just clarify the amendment before we take a vote, Madam Chair?
Floor of 0, a ceiling of 3, 60% of CPI, delete the provision for 1 to 2% increases for gas or electricity, amend LAMC 151.06G to ensure that additional dependents don't trigger a rent increase, and instruct LAHD to increase funding for residential repair, maintenance, and rehab programs for small landlords owning 2 to 10 units, using appropriate and available resources, including Measure ULA and La Casa, that are designed for preservation of our existing housing stock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And would you like to note and file the LHD report?
As long as that doesn't impact Councilmember, the action that we took on Councilmember Blumenfield's motion.
One moment.
Thank you.
Let me take a brief recess just so I can confirm this.
Okay, we'll take a moment. Because the original report is Councilmember Blumenfield's motion, so I don't want to note and file it. And then, right?
Yeah. I mean, even if they did, well,
I don't know. I just want to, yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's 2 different actions on the same thing, so I just want to make sure that we're,
But I also had to have a motion to get the minority report, which is why I did the motion.
okay.
So the note and file recommendation would not affect Councilmember Bloomfield's minority
Okay,
report.
thank you very much.
Councilmember Rahman.
Yes.
Councilmember Gerardo.
Yes.
Councilmember Bloomfield.
No?
Councilmember Hutt.
Yes.
Councilmember McOsker.
No.
3 yeses, 2 nos, and this amendment is approved.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues, for this robust, shh, I'm sorry. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you, colleagues, for this robust discussion. And thank you, Housing Department, Economic Roundtable. You've been incredible partners in helping us think through this. I want to just acknowledge that the questions and the comments and the discussion that we had here, I learned a lot from it, and I want to thank you all. I want to thank all of the housing providers who came and testified. I know this, may be difficult. I don't think this conversation is over yet. I think there will be more discussion at full council. I also think that there are ways in which we can make sure that the questions that you're bringing up are addressed in the way in which we run this city and this department and this rent stabilization ordinance. So I want to make sure that we do that, and I'm committed to doing that. And with that, do we have any other items before us?
The desk is clear, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.